I'd like to call to order the Berlin-Boylston Region Transition School Committee. Thank you all for joining. Before I ask for public comments, just a quick couple of quick things from an agenda standpoint and update standpoint. We have turned off the Q&A functionality this evening. I made a decision to turn off the Q&A functionality as it relates to we have quite a bit of an agenda ahead of us, but what I do want to do is instruct folks to use the email address parentquestions@bbrsd.org. So if there's any questions in relation to the content this evening, I'd like you to, if you can, please utilize that that email address for those questions, and we'll make sure all of the questions are answered. That email, just moving forward, that email address gets looked at every day, and all questions sent in there are either answered or sent to the appropriate folks for answer each day. If there's a larger number of questions that get sent there following tonight's meeting, we'll do our best to respond to those in a timely and orderly fashion. But if you can, please send your questions there. I mentioned this a couple times before I open the meeting. I just want to call attention to our process that we've added to our agenda as it relates to if you would like to have a spot in our public comments to make a statement as it relates to an item on agenda that evening. We've provided you Christy's email address to make a request for that. If we are in a position where we have a number of public comments that don't do that, from a management perspective, I'll just let you know that we will, those folks who request ahead of time will be prioritized, and then we'll do as best we can to fit in all questions or public comments, sorry, from folks who join the meeting at that time. We're going to use the raise your hand functionality this evening for questions. So if there is anybody in the attendee list before public questions closes that does want to make a public statement and you didn't already request it, please raise your hand. So with that being said, and the other piece of that is if, as we go through our process and we would like to, and there are a number of questions or we find the need to schedule some follow-up stuff and the need for a future town hall like we did previously in the year, that's an option that we might utilize as well. With that being said, let me pull up my list. Give me 1 second. Just going to pull up my list of the folks doing public comments. I don't know why I shut it down, but I did. Okay, up first, we've been asked for a request. First came in for a representative from the BBEA Teachers Association. Will be reading a statement on behalf of the teachers union. So I would like to allow Tara Koziak, please, to read their statement.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening. We'd like to take this opportunity to let the community know that the teachers in all 3 schools want to be with our students in the buildings at the same time every day of the week. That is and always has been our goal. However, just like everyone else, we must take into account the practical consideration for our own health and safety, as well as that of our families and fellow community members. It has been almost a year since our world was turned upside down, but for the first time since, there seems to be light at the end of the tunnel. The vaccine is just around the corner for educators and school personnel. Once fully protected, teachers will be more than ready to begin to return to a normal routine. We also understand that this routine or return to normal may not seem normal at first. So we will not only continue to educate our students, just as we have been, but will also play an important role in addressing their social and emotional needs as their world opens back up and life becomes less restrictive. We're also aware that on a national level, there is a general conversation in regards to teachers' unions resisting going back to work. But there is danger in writing off all teachers as thinking the same way within a broad context, made only more volatile by social media and people making claims based on assumptions. The Berlin-Boylston Educators Association has prided itself on working with the members of both towns and has never had a teacher-first mentality, but instead a mentality of working as a community, teachers, administrators, students, school committee members, residents, and everyone in between in a respectful and supportive manner. With that, we understand that social media is something we can't control, but if you happen to see comments indicating that it is the teacher's fault that students aren't back to school fully, or that teachers simply don't want to return, that is not the truth in Berlin or Boylston. So please feel free to gently correct anyone that indicates otherwise. Simply stated, it is more work for us to maintain students at home than in front of us, but we've accepted the challenge and have excelled at it. We also took with stride when DESE decided to increase their requirements, yet asking more of teachers. The teachers' union has not led the charge in the decision-making surrounding the issue or timeline for a full return. We are, however, grateful that we have a superintendent that looks out for the well-being of all stakeholders and that he does communicate with us, allowing us to prepare the best we can for any changes to the model in which we're educating our students at a moment's notice. We want to be back with our students in as close to a normal setting as possible. With that, it doesn't seem unreasonable to ask for some patience as we wait for the opportunity to be vaccinated. The association would never expect any member of any group, administrative team, or school committee member to jump the gun and fully return to meeting in person without having the ability to do so safely. We simply ask for the same courtesy in return. It is the stance of the Berlin-Boylston Educators Association that we will not support a full return in person until all of our members have had the opportunity to receive full vaccination against the virus. We'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tara. And thank you, BBEA. I'm going to go through my list as presented to me. So I don't know if there's any particular order in how I'm going to call on the folks, but I'm going to go through in the order as provided to me. The next statement will be made by Jessica Bork.
Hi. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Jessica Bork. I've been a resident of Boylston for 34 years, and I currently have a second grader and a fifth grader at BES. I am also the owner of Jazziacs Dance School in Boylston, and I have around 150 students between the ages of 3 and 18. I've been a strong advocate for getting the kids back in school since the start of last summer, and I'm here to speak up for myself and for numerous other families who are also struggling with the current school model, many of whom are at this meeting tonight. In understanding how drastically the risk for severe infection drops with age, and that the student-to-teacher transmission rate is exceptionally low, especially at the elementary level, it's concerning to me that we are putting our children at risk for life-lasting and sometimes life-threatening psychological problems when the science points to the schools being able to safely operate. After being shut down for 3.5 months, my dance school was allowed to reopen in June of 2020. Almost immediately after reopening, I started noticing concerning changes with my students. Students were afraid to get close to me. Some were afraid to touch our bars. Some were afraid to come to class at all, and in some cases to even leave their houses. I could go on and on. Thankfully, we have only seen 2 cases of COVID at our facility since we opened, neither contracted at school and neither the source of further spread. However, I've seen far more signs of psychological trauma among my students. Anxiety and depression has become rampant while COVID has been quite contained. During my quest to get our children back to school, I've spoken with several doctors regarding their take on the situation. Each has offered a similar opinion that with the correct safety measures, school should be open and that keeping these children out of school could be doing more damage than good. They've also expressed frustration that the schools are not listening to the advice of the medical community. A UMass professor of family medicine and community health says, this isn't really about protecting children. Limiting their school and activity clearly hurts them psychologically, while not offering children any significant benefit. With precautions, students, especially elementary level, have low rates, almost negligible, of in-school COVID-19 transmission. Going to school full-time can be done carefully and safely, and any decision to limit in-person learning needs to be balanced with the harms that we have more evidence about every day. These harms include social isolation, mood disorders like depression and anxiety, increasing suicide rates, increasing obesity rates, and academic non-progression. Another primary care physician says, as a pediatrician, I support the safe, evidence-based return to school, as do the majority of my Massachusetts pediatrician peers. Remote schooling may be working for your families, but it is creating a caste-based education system, putting our most vulnerable children at risk and leading to an increase in anxiety, depression, and self-injurious behaviors and toxic stress within families, especially where both parents work. I understand many of you are scared, but your fear is not rooted in science. If your family is doing well with remote learning, please continue it, but know that this model is harming children, and your petitions and advocacy to continue what is working for you is actively harming others. We all want what's best for our kids, but as evidence emerges that school return is safe, we need to take that risk and send our kids back. Returning to school is a risk worth taking, and the costs of not taking these risks are high. In closing, I'm stressing not only my support for a full return to school, but also in its urgency. While some may argue that our kids are in school with a hybrid model, my kids have only physically been to school 3 days since December 18th. I can personally attest to the negative impact this is having on family dynamics at home, and I've witnessed with my own eyes the emotional deterioration of these children. I will be thrilled when I hear that we are truly putting the children first and offering the choice of a full return to school, but I honestly worry it might be too little too late. The damage we have done to our homes and to our children during these last several months will be long lasting. Schools are essential. Teachers are essential. It is time that we follow the science and send our children back. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you very much. Up next, I'm going to stay actually on, no, we'll just go in the order. Marie Phillips is up next. Hi, Marie, go ahead.
Hi, Marie Phillips, Haywood Street in Boylston. I have 3 things I wanted to go over. Travel policy was the first one, return to school, and also some feedback about the school calendar. I think those are all on the agenda for tonight. So with travel policy, I'm asking that the school committee please update the current travel policy for the BBRSD school district as soon as possible so that it aligns with the Massachusetts recommendations for out-of-state travel. I would ask that you rectify this policy prior to February vacation week. The current 14-day quarantine is outdated with the advancement of the vaccine and vaccine distribution. Some school districts link the travel recommendation from the mass.gov site as their school policy. That way, if the state has any changes, the school committee does not have to have a special meeting to make any more amendments. The mass.gov currently reads quarantine for 10 days or produce a negative COVID-19 test result that has been administered up to 72 hours prior to your arrival in Massachusetts. If not obtained before entry to Massachusetts, a test may be obtained after arrival. However, all such arriving travelers must immediately begin the 10-day quarantine until a negative test result has been received. Most importantly, please consider the Tohoto class of 2021. It has been a very difficult year in many ways. One of the important items they have missed out on has been the ability to visit colleges. They've applied blind to multiple universities, and with campuses starting to open to admitted students, it is important that they have the opportunity to visit without missing valuable in-person learning when they return. All right, now moving on to in-person return in April. I have some ideas regarding the in-person learning after April vacation. Teachers and staff will have had the opportunity to be vaccinated at this point. Perhaps now is a good time for the reentry committee to reconvene and include members of the community that may help share ideas and help research what other districts are doing throughout Massachusetts. With the possible increase in the number of students going back to school in person, students should have an opportunity to opt in and take the bus, as this will alleviate traffic during drop-off pickup. The current DESE recommendations for student spacing in the classroom is 3 to 6 feet. Perhaps the school committee amend the parameters of 6 feet distance in classrooms, or the schools may not be able to fit all students back at the same time, and therefore cohorts will still exist. There may be a need to hire temporary long-term substitutes and staff from April through June if there is a spacing issue inside classrooms. This will open up more classes and possibly shift the current classes. Lunches could be even eaten outside, and I attached some photos along. Currently, there are some districts that have been eating outside since August. They have been outside for up to 40 minutes every day. Quoting Sir Ranulph Fiennes, there is no such thing as bad weather, only inappropriate clothing. Eating outside the last few weeks of school frees up the gym, the cafeteria as added space for physical education class and/or possible classrooms. Another option may be an early release, where time on learning is a designated time, say 8:30 to 1:30, which includes mask and snack breaks outdoors. And then after students are dismissed, they eat lunch at home with possible asynchronous activities in the afternoon. Lastly, some feedback regarding school calendar, the current calendar for this year. Having children at BES and Tohoto, we have noticed that it was very helpful aligning the PD days so that they were the same for both schools. And I hope that this continues in the future. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very, very much, Marie. Just school committee members, as always, all these statements, some of them are as well available to us on our drive from a review standpoint after. Next up on our list is Bob Holmes. Good evening, Bob. You're on. Go ahead.
All right, thanks, Jim. Thanks, folks, for having me. Very much appreciated. I'll start my video here. My name is Bob Holmes. I have 2 children enrolled at Berlin Memorial, and my third is starting next year. I wanted to share a statement along with some questions specific to remote learning and, more importantly, the return to in-person learning. Before I go further, I do want to recognize the incredible job that the school administration, teachers, and staff have been doing to maintain continuity over the last year. I've certainly found myself out of sorts many times over the last year, balancing so many new challenges, and I'm sure the school staff is dealing with exactly the same. Nonetheless, the care and consideration shown for our children has never wavered or faltered, and I'm incredibly grateful for this. The flexing, pivoting, adjusting, and retooling has been a monumental task for schools. And while I'm sure it's been intense and challenging and frustrating, our teachers continue to perform with grace and kindness and seemingly never-ending patience. My sincerest gratitude to all of those involved. You've done a monumental job over the last year. Separately, I feel compelled to be candid about the sensitive issue of in-person schooling. I have grave concerns for our children. Despite the Herculean efforts of teachers and staff, remote learning is not a sufficient long-term replacement for in-person schooling. Children are struggling. My 2 children, who were once incredibly enthusiastic about school, now dread having to log into their computers each day. My children, who were once excited to get on the bus and see their teachers and friends, now groan at the thought of engaging with their remote tools. It is heartbreaking to see their enthusiasm for learning fade so early in their academic career. It is sad to think that all the love and caring that has set the foundation of my children's academic and social well-being to date is being replaced with feelings of frustration and indifference. Let me be clear, this has nothing to do with what is most convenient for my family. We're very fortunate to have an incredible support system that helps my family maintain the best semblance of the usual that we can these days. This is about young children missing crucial social and academic development in such a vital period of their time. I'm sure our story is not unique. I'm guessing we're actually among the lucky ones. We're lucky to have a considerable support system while many other families struggle to choose between their work, their child's schooling, and the mental health of those in their household. I pray for those families. I also want to make it crystal clear that this note is not a criticism of teachers' work. The teachers have moved mountains to create the best possible remote learning environment. They should be commended 100 times over. However, I believe it's time to admit that we've exhausted remote learning as an option, and continued use of this learning model will cause untold damage to our children. I believe it's time to reconsider the notion of trading our children's vital school experiences for perceived protection from COVID-19. There are a lot of opinions on this topic, and I respect all of them. The last 12 months have had deep emotional impacts on each and every one of us and in unique ways. There is no wrong way to feel about the effects of COVID-19. There is no perfect answer. However, the continued sacrifice of our children's schooling seems damaging and unnecessary. In recent months, there have been several references to safe 100% in-person learning, as well as the vital role it plays in child development. Specifically, in the summer of 2020, the American Academy of Pediatrics, representing 67,000 pediatricians, urged educators to figure out how to get kids back into the classrooms. They stated that the importance of in-person learning is well documented, and there's already evidence of the negative impacts on children because of school closures in the spring of 2020. Lengthy time away from school and associated interruption of supported services often results in social isolation, making it difficult for schools to identify and address important learning deficits, as well as child and adolescent physical or sexual abuse, substance use, depression, and suicidal ideation. A joint academic research paper published in December suggests that in-person schooling does not significantly contribute to the community spread of COVID-19 in towns where infection rates are under control. This paper also documents that this is one of the few points of view in this country that seems to have bipartisan political support. Recent statements from the CDC Director Rochelle Walensky emphasize both the importance of opening schools and the data supporting that schools can safely reopen. Her recent quotes include, "Schools should be the last places closed and the first places opened. There is increasing data to suggest that schools can safely reopen, and that safe reopening does not suggest that teachers need to be vaccinated in order to reopen safely." With that, 3 quick questions, and I'll hand it over. First, what specific data is being evaluated and at what frequency that results in the conclusion to avoid 100% in-person schooling? Second, are all schools in the district evaluated as one, or is each school evaluated based on that community's data? And lastly, what are the exact criteria we are waiting for to return to 100% in-person learning? I appreciate the time you've given me and you've taken to consider my feelings on this matter, and look forward to hearing your responses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. And as it relates to questions during, just in general thought, as it relates to questions during public comments are what they are, comments, and are typically a statement as it relates to an item on our agenda. We don't necessarily address questions specifically. I do believe that some of the content you're asking will be addressed during Jeff's discussion this evening, so you will most likely get some of those answers. And if one of those questions is not answered, we can add that to the list of questions from other parents as well, to ensure, Bob, that you get the answers to the questions that you're asking. So before I call on the last public comment, I had seen a couple of hands pop up. They disappeared as fast as they popped up. So Unless I see hands pop up again before the reading of our last statement, this will be our last public comment of the evening. And that will be, and I apologize if I mispronounced the name, but Sophia Jaganathan.
Yes, sorry, I'll start my video. Hi, my name is Sophie Jaganathan. I have 2 children at Boylston Elementary School. It's very nice to see you all. But I wanted to express my concerns about sending children back to school full-time. And these concerns are related to data, to social distancing, and also just the alternative to the full-time in-person learning. Like anyone, I would love my children to be in school full-time because that's where their engagement and learning is the best. But you know, while there's data on in-school transmission being low, frankly, I feel like I need to know more about that data. Because when I look for the data for academic papers, one thing that maybe I'm missing is that data from students who are in school full-time, 5 days a week in a fully loaded classroom. So I feel like it's one thing to say in-school transmission rates are low, but I just think we need more information about the context of those studies. The studies upon which we're basing our decisions should have conditions that are similar to the conditions that we would be implementing. So we know that children get COVID-19, although, you know, often they have fewer symptoms and they do transmit it. It seems important that we verify it's safe that they go back to school at reduced social distancing. So social distancing is a big concern for me. I feel like by having all the kids in, you know, we're reducing that social distance and we're increasing the amount of aerosols in the classroom. And I'm concerned about the increased level of kind of COVID protection management that teachers would have to undertake in this full-time model, you know, in addition to actually teaching the content. And I don't know how teachers are going to deal with the management of 2 times as many bodies, you know, especially if they have to feel stressed about whether or not they're vaccinated. So, you know, the other part was the alternative to the fully in-person model. And I think that in order for families to make a meaningful choice, I'd really like to see a robust online learning plan that focuses on engagement for those families who don't feel comfortable sending their children back full time. It's great if students can access content from live streams, but will the remote kids get called on? What will the level of engagement be for those kids? So to prevent mental health issues and you know, and less learning for those kids who might, their parents may decide to go fully remote, we need to make sure that engagement is on par for those kids as it would be for the in-person students. And so I think to have that plan is kind of the only way parents can really have a meaningful choice. So I think once we have 2 equitable plans that meet the needs of both groups of families, then I think we can move forward with the idea of, you know, in-person full-time learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie. With that, I do not see any other hands, so that will conclude this evening's public comments. Thank you all that took the time out of your evening to put those together and get up there and do that. Before I move on, I will ask the committee if there is any feedback anybody would like to provide at this time. Great.
Yeah, Jim, I would,
Sure. Go ahead, Mike.
were you able to ask questions of those who spoke?
No,
All right.
we don't ask. Our public comments is not a question and answer. We don't.
Fair enough. Are we gonna address any of the other dozen or so comments that we got?
yes, those could be, I guess what do you mean address them?
We heard from what, 4 or 5 people? Like we had 13 or 14 people wrote in. Similar but different questions. So just, do they get time, or
If
we
they did
read
not
their
request,
emails, or?
the emails have been provided to the full committee for review. None of those folks requested time during our public comment, so no, they would not receive any time for discussion this evening.
All right. Do they get answers to their questions?
Absolutely. Yep.
All right.
Any questions that were part of parent inquiries will be answered.
When do they get?
And as you saw, which I'm, it's always better late than never. I'm trying to start to put together a process for us to consolidate some of the parent inquiries and the emails, because was brought to my attention that not on every email is every school committee member CC'd. And so, committee members weren't always able to see every communication that I responded to or asked Jeff to respond to, which typically I ask Jeff to respond to. And I just want to sort of change that behavior and give you guys an option to see all the communications. So yeah.
In your responses to those questions, though, is the response just thanks for your input, we've got it, we're going to address it, or is it an actual response? And should the committee be able to see all those responses?
It depends. Every response is different. If there are many of the emails are statements made by parents as it relates to their feelings on to or not to return, right? In some of those are questions. Where there are questions, those questions are provided to Jeff and CC'd for administration to provide answers to those questions. As you know, when I respond to parent emails and try to respond as many as I can, as it relates to from an open meeting law perspective, it's not always able for that to occur, right? So I try to do my best to let everybody know that we're responding. And yes, Mike, in some cases it is thank you for your input. And all of this will be taken into consideration, and all those parent emails are reviewed by administration. Now they're reviewed by school committee. And it's all information and knowledge and education provided to us to help us form our conversations and have our discussions as it relates to topics on those agendas.
All right, so we might not necessarily see your answer to them, but we should read them and not discuss them in the meeting, but have them for our information. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments as it relates to our public comments for the evening from committee members? Okay.
Yeah,
yep.
Just a quick thing. Promise I'll be quick. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to all the parents, and I sympathize and I agree with pretty much all of them. And, this has been, it's been tough on everybody. I have 3 kids. So I'm going to talk as a parent just for a second. This is, there's nothing more than I would like my kids to be back in school. I understand the mental health. I've seen it with my 2nd grader. I got twins that are in 2nd grade. 6th grade. And, it's been really, really tough. So I sympathize with everybody. So, and then I'm going to put my school committee hat on. And, I heard and I read the data that was provided from a few of the other people that spoke. And I also saw data the other way. So this is, I've heard doctors say the opposite, and I think I heard somebody say, what was the last person that said their last comment? Where's that data coming from? So it's tough for me to sit here and just, look at data and then see the exact opposite data. So it's tough. It's tough to be here sitting. And when I heard Tara spoke for the teachers union, I understand where they're coming from. So this is a tough thing to talk about. I mean, like, we're talking about, getting the teachers vaccinated, and that's a very, very soon thing based on, where they are in, I believe it's phase 2, the first thing. I mean, there's got to be a compromise here where everybody is going to be happy. And this is just it's a tough situation. I'm going to put a fine point on it for everybody. I hate this phrase. It is what it is right now. Nothing's good when anybody says that. It is what it is, and we're going to get through it. And I can completely sympathize with the whole mental thing. I've dealt with it every day here, in my house. So I don't want anybody to think that, us as school committee members are, we're looking at the whole picture. I'm looking at my kids, but I'm also looking at the teachers. I got to look at the whole thing. So that's my comment. So thanks, Jim.
Yeah, I'll just add, I appreciate what you're saying, Keith. I think it's particularly challenging to serve on school committee with with children who are struggling with this, because you have to be able to keep all children in mind, all families in mind, and it's very difficult. I do appreciate the thoughtfulness of all the parents who have commented tonight and written emails. I feel like the communications were very articulate, very level-headed, and resourceful, and emotional, but not in a way that interfered with effective communication to the school committee. So I really appreciate how people have communicated their thoughts and suggestions and their questions. I do appreciate in particular the questions that Bob Holmes has raised. And there are questions that reflect questions I've raised in the past too. So I do hope that those questions are responded to about what specific data is being evaluated that informs the decisions here, and what are the exact criteria to return to in-person learning that we're trying to meet. So I think those are important questions that can form a lot of our discussion. So thank you to all the parents for your input tonight.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Last comment I'll just make before we move on is I appreciate all those who got up tonight and put their face out there and were able to read those comments. We all know it's not easy to put yourself out there in the public like that, to do that. And I hope as a community, as both communities, I hope we can, as we move forward, respect everybody's opinions, be respectful to each other. Everybody has decisions and makes decisions and has opinions for their families and their loved ones. And I hope as we move forward, we can respect everybody's ideas and thoughts as well. So that would be my only comment, but we will move through our agenda. Item number 3, approval of payroll and payable warrants. Everything going good there? Thumbs up. Great, thank you. Consent agenda. Could I please have a motion to approve our consent agenda as dictated in the agenda, please?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Vote, Lori,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Angela,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Mike. It's an aye for me as well. Moving into our communication section, I'll make a couple of comments before I ask for the rest of the committee. Just 2 updates that I want to make is, one, I want the public to know we are getting all of those emails, consolidating all of those emails. I will try, as I'll do my best to respond and make sure the ones that have specific questions get to the appropriate people. I will try to respond as well in a timely fashion, but I just want you to know that they're all being seen. even the dozens that came in within hours of the start of this meeting, as I think folks were getting prepared that haven't even had a chance to read yet. I will do my best to get to all those, but I want everybody to know that they're being seen in those, and we appreciate all of those comments, and that feedback does get dispersed, at least from a school committee perspective, and goes into our, our knowledge base as it relates to the decisions that we make as a school committee. The other second piece I want to do from a communication standpoint is just remind everybody we have our elections coming up in May. A reminder that all 6 seats of the school committee will be up for election this year. Don't everybody jump at once to volunteer and run. It's a blast, but it is up, and we are going to need folks and volunteers to stand up and help us make some of these important decisions as we move forward. I don't believe you have the opportunity to pull papers yet for that, because we are waiting for some of our local politicians to assist us in getting some things in place, but continue to reach out to your town clerks to find out when you can begin to pull papers. It's very simple, 25 signatures, and you can be put on the ballot for election like any other elected official office in town. So that will be coming up in May, and for all 6 seats. So those were the 2 communications I had for the evening. Any other communications from members on the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much. We're moving into item number 6, is the report section of our agenda. As you recall, if you were on our last meeting, the school committee asked Superintendent Zangi, the administration and principals to provide some data this evening as it relates to return to school, not necessarily specific to full in person, but as it relates to some potential plans, as well as student impact is, I guess, the way I could word it. We asked him to do that at the last meeting. So in this section, I expect that to be the majority of that, but I will hand it off to Superintendent Zangi. You're on mute, Jeff.
Me and technology. First thing I'm going to do is I just want to present the calendar for 21-22 for a first vote. I know some questions have already come in, and we will take care of them. We presented it to the association, and they also have some questions that we will go over. I will answer Ms. Phillips' question about the calendar. Since we've regionalized, we have tried to make it as unified as possible, and make all those PD days line up. So if that's not the case as we go through, we'll take a look at it, because that's one of the purposes of regionalizing. So this would just be a first vote, first read, not a vote to accept. Okay. Is that. Okay, I'm going to move on to this presentation on the reentry plan, which we are affectionately calling Reentry 2.0.
Jeff, before you go ahead, is that school calendar an in-person school calendar, remote calendar, hybrid calendar? What were the questions that you received?
Excuse me?
The school calendar for next year, is that assuming a in-person calendar or hybrid calendar?
We didn't make any assumptions. We didn't make any assumptions about the model. It would be the model. It would be the calendar for any model. We're assuming it's going to be an in-person model, Mike, to answer your question, though.
What's that?
We're assuming it's going to be an in-person model.
Yeah. What are some of the questions that are around it already?
There's one about the holidays, about when we celebrate some of the holidays. Came from a school committee member, and then I don't know what the association questions are yet.
Thank you.
Can I ask one quick question, Jeff?
Yes, ma'am.
And I think it's probably going to be, like something that you're going to talk to the union about and see how they feel. But I did notice that there were snow days, and I'm hoping maybe next year the half day is a nice happy medium, where we don't have to make it up at the end of the year, but the kids still have a little bit of school. And I know it has to do with, it's very, I want to be respectful of the teacher's time and how it will probably be a union issue, but I noticed that on the calendar. I'm hoping maybe we can stick with that, because that's really nice to not think of them in those hot classrooms. I remember BES, there's a certain wing that's just, it's horrible. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on the calendar before I move on? Again, you can send them to us. We usually kind of look at it as we get the questions. All right, so reentry 2.0. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being so patient, and I agree completely with Keith and the parents who spoke. This has been a difficult time. And, you know, you have to understand that our goal is to make the schools as safe as possible, and then let parents make the decision of whether they're going to send their children to school or not. And the only reason we're not in full right now is because we don't think we've met that goal yet. And I'll explain that as we go on here. So why are we going to go back to school at all this year? That'd be the first question. And the answer is kind of simple. We need to normalize the school year for our students and staff. It's heightened anxiety and stress that's been associated with not going to school and not being able to be in school. It's not healthy and it's not safe. And if you reflect on what the parents have said tonight, nobody's mentioned anything about academics. It's all been the social emotional piece. In addition to that, we are falling behind academically. Not as much as we thought, that's for sure. And it certainly varies at each level. We sort of parallel what's going on in the country in terms of academics. And we'll be talking, the principals will talk a little bit about that tonight, and we'll talk a little more in depth next month when they present their testing data. We see cases starting to come down nationally. In the country, the cases have peaked on January 8th. We've seen about a 30% decrease in cases over the last few weeks. But the biggest thing is we finally have a way to protect our teachers. We have vaccines that are right around the corner. We'll be talking a little bit more about that. And that's the piece that we feel will make our schools as safe as we can make them, and then give parents the choice to send their children in. What are we going to do when we come back? Well, we'll continue our focus on the academics just as we've done, but we'll redeploy. We hired some tutors and things like that during the year. We'll keep those extra staff on. We'll redeploy them into the schools to help out until the end of the year. But the other thing we're going to do is we're going to have an additional focus on the social emotional piece. And we do have grant money. We've got quite a bit of it actually to spend to be dedicated to the social emotional piece. And we're still working that piece out, what that's going to be. But there is going to be an increased effort to sort of normalize this transition back to school. Don't forget, we're going to have to do this transition at some point. We either do it this spring or we do it in the fall. And either way, it's going to come at a cost. And if we do it in fall, it will definitely cut into academic time. So we feel this is the best time to do it. What are the conditions for reentry? Well, we want to see a lowering of cases in our community, in our state, in our country. We want to make sure we're going in the right direction. But most of all, we want to provide all our staff with the opportunity to be vaccinated. This right here is the bottleneck because there is not a definite timeline of when these vaccines are going to happen. But we know it's going to happen, and it's close. And we've come a long way. You know, we've come all of this way. These vaccines are weeks away. And I want to be clear about this, that the administration, the school committee is going to request a plan, but we will not submit a reentry plan that doesn't have that component of teachers being vaccinated, because we feel that that's the thing that's going to make our schools as safe as we can make them. And then at that point, we can say, if you want to send your kids to school full in, we'll do it 5 days a week. We'll feel comfortable doing it. And then it's the parents' decision after that. I know a lot of superintendents have said there's way too many variables right now to come up with a plan, but we want to do that. We want to do something by March, certainly by the March school committee meeting, to present something that has enough meat in it that as soon as these vaccines are done, then we can we can get back to school full in person. And if it happens before we set a timeline, we had a placeholder of April 26th. We can get the vaccines done before then, and the teachers have full protection, the staff has full protection, then we'll come back earlier. But we had the 26th as a placeholder because we don't have a timeline yet. We're getting there though on it. But with that, I want to show the community and the committee a flow chart of sort of a simple flow chart of just what we've been working on, what we plan to offer. There it is. Thank you, Chris. I got to get rid of all this other stuff. So, okay, there you go. So here it is. So let's go over this. This is called, again, there's the reentry 2.0. We have a March, April timeline on it. And we're really looking at two components. And I think this will answer some of the questions that came up with the parents here. So we look at the elementary side. What we're looking at is really three components. One will be a full live stream, which will mean we will eliminate the bridge program. Now, one of the biggest issues with the bridge program the parents had was that there was no contact with their teachers. That will be eliminated, and there will be a full live stream. So if you chose that option for your child, they will be live streamed into the class during the day. It could take in the form of cameras, it could take the form of Zoom, it could take the form of anything else you've seen our teachers use up to this point. What's not going to happen, I know when I originally said this, there's this idea that we were just going to have these cameras in a room like reality classrooms, but that's like a TV show. We're not going to do that. It'll be the students will have contact with their teachers during the day. We'll have a full in-person 5 days a week. So you can go live stream 5 days a week, no bridge program. We'll have a full in 5 days a week. One of the other ideas we have, and this would only be for K1 and 2 because of their developmental levels, and this we're still working on, is a full in for 3 days and a live stream for 2 days. For those parents who think my child's too young, they can't live stream for 2 days, can I send them for 2 and have them live stream for 3? That part we're still working on. The full live stream and the full in person, that's pretty definite. In the middle and high school, we would continue to have Edgenuity, but we wouldn't allow any more students to join Edgenuity. If you're in it, you can stay in it. There's a budgetary concern there. There were concerns early on with the pace of the Edgenuity courses, but if you're in it, you like it, you've been successful with it, we're fine with letting you stay in there. We'll have a full live stream model that will look just like it does at the elementary school, with teachers either Zooming their classes or using the cameras. And I know at the high school, they've used various other methods too. And then a full in person. Full live stream would be 5 days, full in person 5 days. It's a simple model. We think that it has something for everybody. We will be sending out a quick survey tomorrow, which will sort of explain these programs again. And we're just trying to get a quick count of how many people would send their children back in each of these models. It's not, you're not committing to anything, but just first time out, tell us what you do. Also keep in mind, sports will continue through the spring. I don't think the school committee has any intention of rescinding that vote. We're waiting for guidance on music and fine arts. We're hoping we can continue that with the music, especially outdoors with the warmer weather. We know that with the warmer weather, we'll be able to open the windows a little more and get some fresh air, increasing the safety, and we'll be able to have some classes outside. So we think that once our staff has a chance to be vaccinated, they'll be safer in the classroom. The stress level will be down. They'll be able to move around the classroom freely without worrying about contracting COVID. It presents a safer environment for the students. And at that point, it's just the decision on the parents' part. So that's all for that, Krista. You can pull that off. Thank you. That's basically what we're looking at. We've been working with the association to sort of flesh this out and to, they had some areas they wanted to look at. Mostly just how this was going to work in the classroom. This is stuff that we wouldn't really think about, that it's a concern for them. Like, how does this actually work in a classroom setting? We would have, obviously, we plan for 100% back. We don't think we're going to get 100% back. We'll probably look more towards 70, 75%. We'll plan for 100. That's about it. That's what we're looking at. Is there any questions? Anything you want me to answer just based on what we've seen here so far?
Jeff, I have two questions, and they're kind of I have two questions that I'll make a statement after. And this might be more, this question might be better answered in your more detailed plan in March. But it also, I thought of these questions from Marie Phillips early in our public comment section, but some of the other challenges in the return to school, like the busing as well as the subs. I know you and I have communicated about this, but we have a couple of hurdles that we need to cross. Even, the state is still mandating limits on the amount of students on buses, as well as we've talked about in the past, the challenge, with availability of subs and those trying to get into the school system that, aren't necessarily considered under the umbrella of vaccines that we would leverage. Do you have any quick comments on those two particular topics? And, or if not, I'd like to make sure, obviously, those are discussed in March if those hurdles are still in our way.
Well, in terms of the subs, we definitely have a sub issue, and we have subs that are our regular subs who haven't shown up this year, and they're afraid too. Many of our subs are retired teachers and things like that, and they're older, they don't want to come in the building. And so what we're planning to do with them is to reach out and say to them, we'll provide you with a letter that says you're a substitute teacher at Berlin-Boylston Regional School District, and try to get them in line to get the vaccine, and hope they'll be willing to come back in the building once they're protected. So that's what we're doing with the subs. I know Christy is preparing the letters right now to be sent out. And in terms of the buses, the conditions still hold. It's 25 students per bus. And we've been working on that closely. I know Bob and the principals worked on it today. And it may require some extra routes, and but we think we'll be able to do this without sacrificing too much instructional time. There may be a little bit of delay there, but we'll have more on that. We are working on it. We think we're well on the way to getting the subs and figuring out the buses. So we'll have more on that in March.
So maybe it might be, maybe one recommendation would be, I know you talked about another survey as it relates to the return to school. I don't know if you planned on including a question around busing and or parent drop-off. I think it would be important to add that. I think it's also important to stress to the parents, and we've got a lot of them on here tonight, and a lot that to stress the importance of answering those questions, in a thoughtful and meaningful way. We all, the school and the administration needs to plan as if all students who want a bus need to have the access to a bus, right? It's very easy to say, well, I can help you solve that issue. I'll drive my kid to school every day, or pick them up. Well, what if that doesn't happen? What if that can't happen one day and you require access to a bus? Everybody is busy. A lot of statements around the challenges that everybody's faced with today, being working parents. So I think it's important that data is, truly dependent on, if you think there's one day that you're going to need a bus, you need to respond as if you're going to need a bus, right? And this is how we're making determinations, or the administration is making the determinations of what they put together. So Jeff, maybe you could, add that question to, your survey.
Yeah, it's a good idea, Jim. We'll do that. And again, we're planning for 100% population. We're planning as if there's no COVID and on normal capacities. So
You would hope the state and the guidelines are going to be in line with teachers getting vaccinations, and we're not going to be sitting here having a conversation in 30 days, assuming teachers are vaccinated, but they haven't lifted the 25, person bus limit, right? We're going to hope that the folks are doing their jobs, right? So, and then the other just comment I wanted to make, I was fortunate enough to be able to spend a little bit of time with the leadership from the BBEA, and that topic about, and it'll come up, and I'm sure a lot of questions are going to come up around what that streaming version of education is going to look like. And I'm not sure there's an answer, and I'm not sure everybody's going to be able to give that answer and what that's going to look like. What I do want to communicate is during that time I spent with the BBA, I can assure you much of that conversation was dominated around the teachers wanting to make sure that they can deliver and stream in a very efficient manner to address those kids who aren't going to school. So it's not, the teachers are working towards, spending a lot of time outside of what they're doing on a daily basis, trying to determine what's going to be the best manner. Yes, there's concerns. We also have legal concerns. Everything gets reviewed with our lawyer, right? But they are spending a lot of time addressing what that will look like and how that will work best, because that's going to differ obviously from every age group, right? What works for 10th graders isn't going to be the same what works for third graders. So it's important to stress that the teachers are doing that outside of that, as well. So that was my only last feedback. Do we have any other committee feedback or questions for Jeff on that discussion?
I have a few questions, Jim. Thanks.
Sure, thanks.
So Jeff, earlier in the year, you said all these decisions going into this plan are based on science, data, right? Everything that you're doing, right? Am I on mute? No.
well, no, I can hear you.
Okay, so everything you're doing is based on science and data, right? That was a question.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I know the big hang up earlier in the year before I joined the committee was the 6 feet distancing thing in school. But everything we see now, science and data suggests that that's not quite necessary. DC is saying 3, CDC is saying now within 6 feet, 3 to 6 feet. CDC is even saying vaccines aren't necessarily required for safety. So why the shift away from the distancing and onto the vaccines now?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Sure. The data and science is changing. It's never absolute. And it's now looking like our initial reasoning for not going to a full in-person program was there was not 6 feet of distance, social distance in the buildings, right? So now the data and the science is showing that, 6 feet is not necessarily a magic number. 3 feet could be good enough. We have 3 feet. So why the shift in the focus on only the vaccine? You said something to the effect of the vaccine is the reason we're not back yet. Once there's a vaccine, we'll be back. The science and data don't necessarily support that as the only option. So this kind of goes back to Bob's question. What are the criteria that's avoiding the 100% in-person learning? And you keep seeming to focus lately on the vaccine. If there were no vaccine, would we not be entertaining any idea of being back 100% in person?
No. Well, let me answer your first question first. There's always been guidance around the difference between 3 to 6 feet. And I presented it at the meeting in August. That hasn't changed.
Right.
I mean, there's a difference of about, I don't know, 4 or 5% in terms of your chances of contracting COVID, whether you're at 3 feet or 6 feet. And as a matter of fact, one of our parents just sent that. But the fact of the matter is the school committee signed essentially a binding contract with the association predicated on a 6-foot spacing. That's in place. It does make the building safer. Would 3 feet work? I don't know, but 6 feet certainly safer. That's what was agreed on. So the committee agreed on a contract that provided the most safety, which is 6 feet. If somebody said there's not going to be a vaccine for 2 years, well, then we'd have to suck it up and go back, I guess. But I'll go back to what I said originally at the beginning of my statement. Our goal is to make the schools as safe as possible as we can right now. That vaccine wasn't available then. It's available now. It makes sense to wait. We're not talking years, a few weeks to get this done and provide the safest environment we can for our students. If
Has
you
a
think
date
about
been
the
announced for
community,
when
well,
that
if you
vaccine
go
is
to
going to be
community,
ready?
Mike, you got about a 50-50 split. So
Has the date been announced when the vaccine will be available?
it has not been.
teachers?
We think it's.
We don't know that it will be here in a couple of weeks.
We think it may be around mid-March.
So we
And
don't know. That's over a month away, not a couple of weeks. So that's unfortunate. I have another question about the social
let's
emotional
say,
money that you said.
let's say it's 6 or 7 weeks. It's not 2 years. And so your initial question was, would I have a different opinion on it? If they said that there wouldn't be a vaccine for 2 years, many of these vaccines take 2-3 years to develop, I would have a different opinion on it, because I'd say we'd have to get back to school. We can't continue doing this, but we've come this far. It makes sense. Parents are obviously concerned about the safety in the schools. It makes sense at this point to provide the safest possible environment for our buildings. And then we can have a good conscience and say, we've done everything we can, everything that we could possibly do at this time to make the buildings as safe as possible. And then it's the parents' choice whether they want to come into school or not. Then we can open the schools 5 days.
Okay.
Vaccine was nowhere on the horizon in August.
Yeah. You mentioned something about you have additional money to deal with the social emotional aspects, and you're going to focus on that when they do return, whenever that is. What do you do in the meantime? I mean, that's 75 days away.
Well, we still have other money too. There's a new grant that provided additional, I believe it was $10,000 for us to work on social emotional programs. So I only mention it because I know parents are going to be curious, what are you going to do when you come into school? What's the difference between that and what you're doing right now? We know that when there's a transition, we transition back. This would be the first time these students have seen each other and since last March. And in many cases for 6th graders, I've talked to parents of 6th graders, those kids have never seen kids from the other towns. And that's concerning to a lot of parents. So
Right.
We're going to have to put a focus in that area.
So for the parents that spoke tonight, parents like Bob, parents like Josh that we got emails from, where, we're seeing kids with all these problems. We're seeing parents telling us about how, they had honors students last year who this year, they've fallen into depression and can't get out of bed for school. They're upset with that. So between now and 75 days from now, I mean, we've been in school for 91 days. We still have 75 more days to go until we're back full in person. What do we, the school community, tell these parents? Like, hey, your kids are struggling. Nothing we can do about it. We signed a contract. What do we tell them?
Well, that's up to you, what you tell them. I can say.
I want to tell them we want to go back to school, but
as
nobody
a
seems to agree with
superintendent,
me.
I'll tell them that I'll feel comfortable with a full-in model once we have the safest possible environment. And that will include having our teachers fully protected and vaccinated.
So parents just have to deal with it for 75 more days.
I'd like to make a quick comment. If anybody hasn't noticed, the overall theme of this discussion is that we are getting kids back to school. We are in a much greater position than many other communities. Are we in as good a position as others where they're able to already begin to bring some of those students back? No, we're somewhere, but we are definitely on the higher edge of a community that, you know, we were able to get hybrid going early on. A lot of communities weren't able to do that. We're getting the kids back in school. The overall message that should be taken away from this is that the goal of the administration is to get kids back into school this year. There just needs to be a process, and Paul and way behind that to accomplish that. So I don't, you know, I mean, that would be, at least from my perspective, what my message. If somebody asked me when the kids are going back to school, I would say we're going to get those kids back in school. We're going to do it in a safe and healthy manner for all of those kids. Is it going to be perfect for every family in this district? Is it going to be perfect for every student? Are students going to be impacted socially, emotionally, educationally? Are teachers going to be overworked, undervalued, and deal with extreme circumstances? Sure, absolutely. All of that stuff is going to occur. But we absolutely have a plan and are working towards getting those kids back into the school. And so that would be my comment as it relates to what I would tell a parent who came to me asking what the plan is to get kids back in school.
So I understand the teachers are, they're way overworked right now. I feel bad for them with how they've got effectively 3 separate classes they've got to teach on a daily basis instead of just one. Everybody has sympathy for the teachers. That's understandable. But for parents who are at home struggling with a kid who is in a cohort with, none of their friends are in that same cohort, so they feel like they don't have a support system at school, being by themselves, or kids who are struggling, 75 more days of that is coming. And that's what we're saying to the kids and to the parents right now. So I understand the teachers are overworked, stressed. It would be much easier for them if we were in person. I feel for them, I really do. But, we're here to make decisions in the interest of the students. And, right now we're basically saying, we signed a contract in August and sorry, keep struggling for 75 more days at least. And then when they do get back to school in person, April 26th, I mean, what is there, 6 weeks left, or 6 or 7 weeks left of school at that point? I mean, I guess your goal is to just, sort of do like a soft opening or something for next year, but that's now 2 classes that have been impacted by this. One of them for almost the entire year and a half, this current seniors. Last year's seniors kind of just, they're done and gone, and, who's worrying about them now? I don't know, but I don't know. It seems like we could do better. I don't know. I don't know why it's, why we're not.
Mike, it's not just a contract. I mean, even if you look at this in a practical sense, if a teachers are safer, then the chances of them not getting sick and losing time is greater. If a teacher gets sick now, and, even if they don't get what I get and are out for like a couple months, that's a month missing. That's a month. That means, first of all, that's trying to find a sub. I just told you what we're doing to try to get subs back into school. So if you rush it at this point and we lose, first of all, if we lose more teachers than we have subs, then we have to go full remote. So then we're back. We're not even in hybrid anymore. We're in remote. If a lot of teachers go out, we close the schools down. So it's not just a contract. It's that by looking out for the health of our teachers and the safety of our teachers, it guarantees that those teachers are now in front of those kids. They can move freely around the class and act more like normal teachers. It's not just a legal part. It's not just a contractual part. In a very practical sense, even if you didn't care about their health, if they get sick, it'd be very difficult to find someone to replace them. Forget about if they get sick and they're out for a couple months. Then we really have a problem. And then you're in an even worse situation, because now you have somebody in front of that student who's not even their teacher. They don't even know this person, and they can't, and usually many times we can't get someone to deliver those lessons. So it's not those things. And for the extra time, we're not saying you're just going to have to wait just for the sake of waiting. We're saying wait a little bit longer so that we can provide a safe environment, so that we know that the teachers who are in front of your kids are going to be safe and they're not going to have to be out of school. It makes sense on a lot of levels. So it's not just continue to wait for no reason. There's a real reason for this.
Well, that was my original question, does the data and science say that if we go back now, we're going to be in that situation? Because I think it has changed from what it was over the summer.
Well, it doesn't say we're not either. I mean, again.
I think it does actually.
No, you can't find a study like that. For every study.
I think one of the parents sent us one.
Somebody else can find one that says just the opposite.
Yeah, that's true. That's for every situation. Yes, I agree with that.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying from a practical standpoint, we've come all this way. Let's provide the safest possible school environment we can, and then bring our kids back. Nobody's more of a proponent than me of getting the kids back. I've been saying it since August, but at this point, there's a vaccine right around the corner. It just makes sense to wait a little bit longer. Because I don't know if all our teachers are going to get sick, but if something happens, it doesn't even set us back to hybrid or remote. Maybe it's even worse than that. So I just asked you to have a little bit additional patience. Let us work through this.
Well, listen, Jeff, I have the patience with you. Personally, my daughter's in kindergarten. She doesn't know anything better. You know, I'm speaking up for the parents who are struggling. Their kids are struggling. And we're just telling them, have patience, wait a little longer. I don't know if another week is too long, or another 3 weeks is too long, or 75 days is too long. I don't know. I'm fine by, we have the luxury of being able to work from home, take care of the kid, do all that. But a lot of families don't. And that's why I'm speaking up.
I get it, Mike. Listen, I don't have the answers. I don't know that this is 100% correct, and nobody else does, but it seems like
Hey, Jeff.
a reasonable and logical plan.
Jeff, in an effort to kind of rein this back in, and I know Angela wants to make a comment, I want to allow everybody have appropriate time from a committee member if they'd like to make a comment. I'm going to ask that we pass the comment over to Angela right now. Angela, go ahead.
Thank you, Jim. I just had a few comments. The one with Jim, your comments about what you would say to families, I totally agree with that. I would also add too, with the families that have the kids, especially the elementaries that are struggling, I would encourage a parent to notify the principal, notify the teacher, because all the schools have supports in place to help with the social emotional things the children need right now. I know at the middle high school, they have the 8 block and certain programs. They are, the counseling office is triggering, you know, if a child is showing them alertness, but now it's for the elementaries, I think it's also up to the parents to kind of relay that they need a little extra help with their kid for the social emotional needs going on. My question is more, I want to make sure I understood the chart. So the live streaming is for the students that do not want to come back full in. The high schoolers, they won't be allowed to do Edgenuity, so they have to do the live stream. I want to make sure I have that correct. And then for the elementary, I was a little confused. So is the hybrid option for the K1, 2, 3, is that for if that student and their family doesn't want to do full in, but they don't want to do full live stream either? Is that what that's saying?
So let me go back to the Edgenuity question. So if you're in it, you're in it. We're not going to stop the program, just no more new admissions.
Right.
If you're in K1, 2, you really have 3 options. You can do a full live stream, a full in-person, or if you think that your child couldn't handle either of those options, there is a possibility of this hybrid. And again, that's the one we're kind of working on. There might be something else we do with those K1, 2 students, but you're understanding it correctly, Angela.
Okay. My last comment is with the vaccine and knowing that not all the staff is going to be able to probably get it at the same time and have their follow-up second booster at the same time. Just a thought. I don't know if it's possible, but you know, some of those early elementary kids that really need benefit from being in school, what if the kindergarten teachers have their second shot? Is there any possibility of staggering classes or grades coming back, or are you thinking more when all the teachers at all 3 schools have had an opportunity to have their vaccination going back. So you don't have to answer that now. That's just a thought I wanted to put out there.
Okay, thank you.
Not done. Thank you, Jim.
A question, Jeff, have you thought about having what is it called, pool testing? Was that what it was? The state is sponsoring through March, and does that factor into any of your thinking?
We did think about it. We asked the nurses and to evaluate it, and their recommendation is that we did not do it. We do not do it.
Why is that?
They had a few concerns about it. I don't have my folder in front of me, so let me think about this. One was the cost. There's so many administrative pieces to this, things you have to keep track of, that they felt that they would not be able to do this during their normal day. And actually, the state recommends having a manager and some other administrator, I don't know what the title is, but it would require us to hire some additional people. They also felt that, especially for the young children, because the test that they're using is the swab, the test with the swab. And I know most of us have had at least one shot at that. Is very, very uncomfortable. And they felt that, especially with the younger kids, that if they were distressed, it could cause kind of an emotional reaction, and they would have to continue to deal with that. And they didn't think in a school setting that's something they would want to do. If they had.
Is it required that if you go with that pool testing provided by the state, that the entire district has to do it, or could you target, say, the middle and high school or the upper grades of the elementary, for example?
I'm not sure, because one of the other issues, I'm not sure about that, but one of the other issues they had was with compliance. So if you did a cohort and you did say like 6 out of 10 and they came back negative, it would send a false message to the community that the group was negative, when there's possibility that some were not. They had additional concerns about the cost. The initial cost is picked up by the state. I believe is the first 6 weeks or so, something like
It's
that.
through the end of March, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. And then we would have to figure it out from there. There was another issue. There's a program that I forgot what it's called now. Again, I don't know where my folder is, but there's a program that you're required to be part of. The BINX, I can't remember. We're not part of it. And so the state never really laid out the guidelines for districts who weren't part of that program. So they had 4 or 5 concerns that were enough that they felt that it wasn't a good idea to do it.
Oh, thank you.
There are districts that are testing, but many of them aren't using that. They're just hiring, they just have contracts,
And have you-
South like that.
Have you looked into the expense of that?
Yeah, I think that probably the least expensive right now that I've seen is about $18 a student
Per test?
per test, yeah.
And could that be done if you hired out independently? Can you do pool testing, batch testing like that? Because that price would go down.
That is a batch testing price. That's the test. That's the price per student if you're doing like an entire district. That's down from $34, $35, which is what one of the districts in particular had mentioned.
And are we getting further monies from the state or feds? Didn't I read something that we're still getting more money in, right?
We are.
Can you, how much, what are we getting?
I think Barbara Carroll probably could do a better job with this, but I think it's about 110,000 on the ESSER 2.
127,408 in the CRRSA, which is ESSER 2. And then we have the other amount too. We have about,
Is it?
it's in my report. Susan. What's that?
And 10,000 of that is devoted to the social emotional, correct?
Social emotional, yes, that's correct.
That's what I was talking about, Mike.
And then we had another amount of $35,450, the State Coronavirus Prevention Fund Program Grant. So we do have funds that way.
And is all that money spoken for, or could any of this kind of pool testing be considered from those monies?
It could be by definition of these grants.
There's a lot of potential uses for the money. I mean, if I was just to give you a quick idea, we potentially have to pay for additional buses. We potentially have to pay to have monitors running before school programs to watch kids to help with pickup. We have additional tutor costs. We might need additional staff for kind of maintaining and running food service that they're doing more than they normally do with having to put things in trays. So, probably we could spend more on instructional costs than we're spending now too. So there's a lot of things, and we've, it is a challenge. We're trying to figure out what to do with it best, and not everything's been decided yet, but there's a lot of needs, and it's across 3 schools, and doesn't really go as far as you might think it does.
We're going to devote a lot of the ESSER 2 money to FY22 because we know we're going to have some need there. Is there a specific reason that you have an interest in the pool testing, Susan?
No, I just wondered how much you had looked into that, and what the costs would be involved, and what how that might impact our timeline for return.
Jeff, I'm going to ask a follow-up question on that. Outside of feedback from our nurses that you mentioned, did you solicit any other feedback from any other medical resources for feedback on the pool testing, and or even the Board of Health in either one of the towns as a response to that?
No, I talked to some other districts about it, but I in terms of the medical people, I stopped with the nurses since they're the ones who are going to be on the front line and are going to have to do most of that legwork on that.
Can I ask that in the future, when we talk about this particular subject, can we get some other feedback from some other sources outside of just our own nurses, please?
Sure.
So
Even hearing, just to add on to that, Jim, even hearing from some of these districts who are doing this work already might be informative.
yeah, and I think we can, from a school committee perspective, we can do some of that research as well. We can utilize the resources at hand with the MASC and whatnot to understand what some other districts are doing. I just want to make sure we're not narrowing our focus too much in terms of how we respond, and some of these options that might be and might help, to your point, Susan, getting us back. I just want to make sure we have multiple perspectives would be important to me.
Hey, Jeff, one last question for you. You don't have to necessarily answer this right now. We don't have to spend time on it, but maybe you could write about it Friday in your newsletter. Back to the social and emotional ways that you're helping kids now. Could you give us some ideas of specific things that are available, what you're doing for that? And then you mentioned a little while ago, you and I think 30 other superintendents wrote to the governor, and also what Tara, who spoke earlier, what are your lobbying efforts going for getting that vaccine pushed up? Have you reached out to them? Are you lobbying for that? What's going on with that? So don't go into any time here, but if you could let us know Friday, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, Michael, you bring up a good point. And again, better late than never sometimes, right? I talked about early on in the meeting about an agenda change, and I was going to make an agenda change and remove the update because we're going to go over time here. I'm going to remove, I wanted to remove our last item, which is the school committee goals update. I'm probably going to remove that. And what I want to do is bring to the attention, I meant to get this on the agenda earlier, but I think it's time sensitive, and talk about what the school committee, to that point, where the school committee can do in terms of a lobbying standpoint. There's been some info released on MESC and a number of other districts that are putting their names on letters and reach out to the government officials. So I'm going to put that on our topic tonight. It'll be the last thing we talk about. from a school committee perspective, because I think it is time sensitive. If we're going to do it, the time to do it, it's now. So thank you for reminding me that I wanted to change that from an agenda standpoint. So thank you. Lori and Keith, did you have anything you guys wanted to add as it relates to Jeff's discussion, questions, or comments? Okay. Hearing any? All right. Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you very much for that update. Just so moving forward, people understand from, I think from a school committee perspective, we have a meeting the end of February. That meeting at the end of February is very focused on our pre-budget hearing. It takes a lot of time to discuss the budget. Obviously, a lot of these topics fall into this budget discussion as well, what that looks like next year. I won't be asking Jeff to give us an update at that meeting on this particular topic because we will be focused on budget, because there's very time sensitive things that we need to accomplish and Bob needs to accomplish to get budget moving along for town meetings and votes. But I will be asking Jeff to provide us another update in our March 9th meeting, as well as probably a preliminary draft of his return to school plan. I've already talked to him about that, and he's going to begin working on that. The goal from a school committee, just so everybody in the public understands, at that meeting, I don't foresee us voting on anything on that particular meeting. What I do see is a review of the preliminary plan. I hope, and my expectation is we'll have some more information as it relates to numbers, vaccines, all that good stuff in a few more weeks. And I will be asking the committee at that time if they do want to move forward and or what our time frame should look like as it relates to a vote and discussion for a vote around a return to school at that time. So that could, as an example, that could be as simple as like when we went back to school, a special meeting that was a week later to discuss a vote because everything's in line and we're in a good position, or time frame is still aiming towards those April dates that we've discussed, and we'll move on to there. But that's what I'll be asking the committee at that point to provide feedback on, to determine how we as a group will move that discussion forward. So if there's any questions or comments around that, I will move us through our agenda this evening.
So we're not even going to vote until after the March meeting? Shouldn't we be voting at the March meeting? Isn't this sort of the preliminary plan that we got tonight?
There's nothing, I don't expect that there'll be anything to vote on. It'll be a draft of a plan that we can consider.
So I don't think vaccines are going to happen before that meeting?
I don't know. I don't know, and I don't have an answer to that. Feel free to call, Department of Education or the governor and try to get an update on that. If that's something you can help us get an update. The message has been pretty clear this evening that we don't have that time frame. We don't have that date. That's not something that anyone has available to them. So
all we know is that the teachers are part of the second block of phase 2. And right now we're in that first block of phase 2, the 75 and older. And I know the governor said something last week about making teachers a priority, but as far as I know, they're still with all the other people listed for that second step of phase 2. Hadley School Committee did do a resolution in support of the teacher vaccine as soon as possible. Again, they're the next ones in line. It's just, I don't think anyone knows when next in line is coming is a problem.
Okay, I will, Carol, you would be next up in line. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. So included in this month's report, you have information on MCAS, some grant updates Susan had mentioned earlier, and we were giving some numbers on that. We have information on SATs, as well as the school district report cards. The annual report cards will be out by the end of February, posted on the website and also distributed to the parents. So you'll be looking for those. And finally, something that's not on, and this information I have either posted already in the newsletter or will add to this week's newsletter so the public can see this. Finally, just to get update on the structured learning time, the surveys are due to DESE on Friday. We were informed of that yesterday. So we have our numbers ready to go. We've been able to make the increases to live learning sessions, and we feel confident and comfortable that we'll be able to meet the requirements that DESE has put forward to us as far as that. So that's the latest update. I didn't know if you had any questions on any of that information.
Not
I'll
hearing.
turn-
Not
What's
hearing
that?
any.
Okay,
Not
great.
hearing.
Then I'll turn that over to my colleagues who'll be doing a presentation on the updates as far as the status of the schools. So Diane, you are on there first.
Thank you. Good evening. The report that I had submitted is broken down into several categories. I wanted to give you an update of where we stand on these categories. The first one is academic progress. We had our faculty take a look at their curriculum maps and compare them from those curriculum maps of last year to this year. And the following results, as you can see, were reported. What we are seeing in the middle school in the areas of ELA, science, and social studies, we're averaging approximately two to 3 weeks behind in curriculum. We need to realize also that we began the school year 2 weeks. The opening of school was two weeks delayed. In the area of middle school math, we actually are seeing that our teachers are, for the most part, on track as to where they were in comparison to last year. And we believe that this is due to the fact that there are definitely more online curriculum tools that are available through our math curriculum than there are in these other subject areas. So I'm pleased to report that in the area of math. For high school, all in all, the core content teachers have reported they're, anywhere from 2 weeks to approximately, again, about 3 weeks behind. And what we do know is that, moving forward, during this year with hybrid and with the addition of block 8 and the fact that we are having more remote days versus snow days when we have inclement weather, that there are fewer interruptions than there are in a normal school year. And because of that, and because of the fact that also our teachers are really focusing on power standards and streamlining the curriculum, we are anticipating that, any curriculum time that is lost to date will be made up by the end of the school year. And looking at our assessment data, for our reentry plan that we had submitted at the beginning of the school year, we had created DDMs, which are district determined measures, in each one of our core content areas. And that gave teachers an idea of where they were in response to any gaps that students may have encountered in the curriculum due to COVID at the end of the school year, but also any type of summer regression that may have occurred. And what we did is we are targeting those individuals that need intervention in ELA and math. We have hired both ELA and math tutors to help with those. They actually are working with us 2 days a week, and they do use that block 8 that we have set up for intervention time for students as well. AimsWeb is being utilized in the 6th grade, and they conducted the first benchmark assessments in AimsWeb in September and October, and are currently will be conducting within the next week or two the winter AimsWeb to be able to compare those results, and again to be able to set up intervention for those students that need it. There's been a lot of talk today at this meeting about social emotional status, and no doubt that it has taken the toll, on everyone, and unfortunately, especially our students that don't have the developmental skills that some of us as adults may have in order to be able to handle this pandemic. And what we quickly realized that there isn't one size fits all. There isn't one magic program that will allow all of our students to feel connected, to feel part of a community. And what we have tried to do at the middle high school is to take a look at our students individually, but also take a look at their developmental levels. And so the counseling department has done a tremendous job over the course of the year, from their screening services in the very beginning of the year through individual check-ins with students, through meeting with students through Zoom with Block 8, and letting all students know what services and supports are available to them, as well as, our school adjustment counselor has been able to set up a virtual classroom for, any student and even any parent to be able to access, that gives them resources. And we also, as an administrative team, Sally and I have surveyed all of the students in grades 6 through 12 regarding really what is working well for them and what is not working well for them. And what we did is we tried to focus on the things that we could change, that we had control over. And so we were able to sort of revamp the look of Block 8 to have it be more of a support block. We focused on intervention in the very beginning of the year, and the second half of the year, we are really focusing on supports. And during the third term, we'll be working with our Mind Matters Club and our wellness team, and we'll be providing refresh day-like activities during Block 8 that focus on, the social emotional piece and strategies that students can use to help them, deal with some of the things that they are going through. We can, not only the students, but also the staff and the social emotional needs of our staff as well. And from our professional development at the beginning of the school year, our STAGS PTO has been a tremendous support to our faculty and staff. From providing lunches and breakfasts. We as an administrative team try to do team building activities during our PD time, during lunches. And we also have been able to secure a grant that we're able to purchase some things for the staff that hopefully we'll be able to pull those out in the spring. And then our school adjustment counselor actually just Monday did a presentation and created a virtual teachers lounge filled with stress relieving apps and activities that are similar to what the students have offered to them. So those are some of the things that we are doing for the students and staff regarding social emotional learning. Attendance, you see the graph. I'm pleased to report that there's an increase of a 1.4% increase over the same months this year as opposed to last year in our attendance. And I think that is, due to the fact that number one, there was a decrease in families traveling. That 1.4% really came in the months of December, that we would typically see families traveling and taking their students out of school prior to vacation, and that did not occur this year in most of our cases. And I'm sure if we did it in February, we would see the same thing in February. Building management and procedures, a big shout out to our custodians and to our facilities director, Steve Busateri, did an amazing job and continue to do an amazing job with the cleaning and the overall daily setup of our building. They worked extremely hard over the summer. There's also a tremendous amount of additional work that is placed upon them. And I'd like to thank them for, keeping our hand sanitizers filled and our cleaning supplies filled, and doing whatever they can to keep everybody in school and safe. movement through models. Obviously the two options for our families at the beginning of the school year was full remote through Edgenuity. We had 23 students take advantage of Edgenuity. The rest of our student population chose to be hybrid. Second semester, we have 27 students who currently chose Edgenuity. There was an increase, obviously, of 4 students that chose to be full remote. And, this transition, we did have some students go from Edgenuity back in, and we did have students who were full in, chose to go to Edgenuity. And we did have to move from hybrid to remote learning 3 times during semester 1 due to COVID-related issues within the building, but I am happy to report at the writing of the I am happy to report at this time that there has not been a single case of virus transmission within the school building. And I really think that is due to the fact that parents and faculty and staff and students have been very good at making sure that if they are not feeling well and have any symptoms whatsoever, that they are not coming into the building. As you can see, we have upcoming events. February 8th, the yesterday term 2 grades were posted. We have school council and obviously winter recess coming up next week. So that is my report. Are there any questions?
Sure, I have a question for you.
Yep.
Thanks for the report. I did read it and I read the others as well. And it sounds like despite all the challenges that were thrown at these teachers, 2-week delay, remote learning, having to go to full remote, you guys are still pretty much on track with the academics, which is the part that I'm most concerned about right now. Is that, so the remote really hasn't been a hindrance to the academic piece now. Is that true?
Well, I mean, as I stated, we are about approximately 2 to 3 weeks behind, and we're halfway through the semester. So I'm anticipating that by the end of the school year that we'll be making up those 2 to 3 weeks.
Is that 2 to 3 weeks and compared to where you were at this point last year, or is that simply because of the 2-week delay to start the year?
Well, that sort of is 2 different questions. So obviously because of the 2-week delay, we are, we would anticipate that teachers would be 2 weeks behind.
Right.
So, that is maybe the biggest factor in it. But teachers, as they do on a daily basis is, they change their instruction. They take a look at, where the students are and where the needs are. So, one group may be ahead. This is an overall, average number. You may have one group, one section that is ahead of the other for a variety of reasons. But, again, we're approximately 2 to 3 weeks behind, which I think is only 2 to 3 weeks behind, which I feel is pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I mean, as a parent trying to put it into terms, I can understand 2 to 3 weeks when you had a 2-week delay to begin with. You had all these other challenges of additional remote days that weren't necessarily expected. Other things like that. Teachers have really worked hard and really gone above and beyond, in my opinion, to keep them up to date. I think you said in math subjects, they're right where they should be.
And yes,
in the concern.
Yep. In the middle school. In the high school, they're a little bit further behind, just because there are many more standards, that in each one of those courses that have to be covered than in the middle school courses. So yes, it's
Yeah, to be honest, I would have expected you to say that you were much further behind than that. So I mean, I'm impressed. I think it's a really good thing that despite all these challenges that are out there, we're still keeping up.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. I don't know if you can answer this. This is actually a question for each of the principals in your time. Do you have a sense, Diane, of about what proportion of students, say in the middle school and the high school, you have serious concerns about either academically or social emotionally. Sometimes these obviously intersect, so social emotional disengagement for a variety of reasons can impact the academic learning. So they overlap, but I'm wondering about what proportion of these students we think are really, you're seeing evidence of struggling.
You know, Susan, what I can answer to that is, you know, first of all, I'll answer the academic portion of it. We had, you know, we obviously can run numerous reports with our student information system, Power School. And so we do run mid reports on, you know, on failures, on students that have D's or F's. And so what we were able to do is we were able to actually run that report earlier on in first semester and really be able to target those students. And what we are trying to do on a daily basis is we take a look at our course numbers, and we have been trying to bring in students, you know, as much as possible that we know are really struggling academically. And oftentimes, you know, unfortunately, those go hand in hand. When a student tends to be really struggling academically or social emotionally, you see it in the other. And so what we are trying to do is bring, you know, as many students in 4 days a week as possible. We do have to look at cohort numbers, you know, for safety reasons. Administration and the counseling office has also brought in, we have, you know, all seniors who are, you know, are failing courses that are needed for graduation. We have had actual, for the most part, in-person meetings with both the parent and the student in the counseling office and come up with a plan for those students as well. We're beginning with the 8th graders. And, you know, to be honest with you, it can change, Susan, from week to week. I mean, I think if you even take a look at your, you know, our own individual, you know, social emotional spaces, we can be fine one week and the next week we're really struggling.
Yeah.
And, you know, you compound that with being an adolescent, and, you know, it's even more variable. You know, what I can say is that, you know, parents and students have been very good about advocating for themselves. Teachers, you know, teachers are oftentimes the ones that say, hey, listen, you know, I'm really concerned about, you know, this student. And we go ahead and we reach out. So to give you a percentage number, I can't give that, you know.
Yeah.
Because it changes every week.
Yeah, it's a live thing.
Yeah.
How does it, should a parent, and maybe this is a district question, I don't know, Jeff, but should a parent who's watching their child struggle be concerned about the possibility of grade retention? Generally speaking, obviously, this is, you know, individual, but I mean, what's your thinking about grade retention in the COVID context?
From, you know, at the middle high school, from my, you know, my personal opinion, you know, we're going to do everything possible not to have that happen. However, we want to also make sure that we are not just pushing kids along just to push them along, because what is going to happen is that is going to set them up, you know, for a difficult future. You know, if we continue, you know, if we do that. So what, you know, what we tend to do, Susan, is, you know, obviously is to do the things that we're doing now. We have conversations as we get closer to, you know, towards the end of term 3 about supports that we can put in place, whether that is tutoring, whether it is, you know, additional after school help. We then, you know, as we get closer to the end of the 4th quarter, we talk about, you know, summer supports that are available. You know, whether it is summer school or credit retention for, you know, for high school students. So, you know, we do everything possible for that not to happen. I can't say that it won't happen, but, you know, we do everything possible. So, you know, we're not in that position and the family's not in that position to have that happen.
And is the district planning any offerings to support students sort of rebuilding any of that academic loss or struggle during the summer months? Does the district provide anything this year?
Susan, we are looking at that piece very, very carefully. We're looking at obviously the assessment results that are coming out, the benchmark assessments from this point forward. And we will consider that. We've already started talking about that. And part of that, going back to the grant funding and utilizing that funding and prioritizing it, part of that funding would be towards something like that, where we either offer programs or tutoring opportunities for students that have been identified for these things, both social, emotional, and academic pieces.
I would hate to see any student be retained in a grade this year due to COVID circumstances.
As would we. Mm-hmm. We're doing everything we can, I think, and you'll hear from Ace and John to speak to that as well, what's happening in their schools. And these students we're aware of, and we are offering opportunities to support them.
I'm glad you're thinking about that, and
yeah, and we are looking at that for the summer as well.
For that, thank you.
Yep.
Diane, was that all you had?
Yes, if that's all the questions that you have for me, yes.
Any other questions for Diane? Committee? Hearing none. Okay, who was on next? Was it Ace, it looks like?
I think it's my turn. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. I see we still have a large population in attendance. Before I get into my report, which I know all of you had, I will try to summarize it for you. I did want to just address some of Dr. Henry's questions from the elementary level. We have not retained anyone in my tenure, and this is not the time to start doing that, especially, you know, I think at all levels, but especially at the elementary level, the onus is on us to make sure that we're meeting all of the kids where they are and we're moving them and getting them closer to where they need to be, pandemic or not. And pre-pandemic, none of the research really supported retention as a viable option for kids. Didn't really help. So hasn't come up in my building, and I don't anticipate it coming up. The other part of your question is that I wanted to talk to is the students that are struggling. And there are them, and to Diane's point, they come and they go, and it can be some of them struggle in the asynchronous work, and some kids we had struggling when we came back to hybrid and they had trouble coming back into the building. When kids are asynchronous or at home, we keep track through attendance, because we look at that work completion and what the level of completion is and what the quality of completion is. So that's our red flags. So typically we'll reach out to those kids that are struggling in that way, offer supports to parents, problem solve different types of solutions. Similar to the high school, we do have some students, primarily identified students, that are attending 4 days. And we're constantly, pretty much consistently every week meeting with another family and discussing whether or not their child should come 4 days or not. It's a high threshold, but we do have we have quite a few kids. As long as we can manage it and maintain the social distance, we allow that as much as possible. Going back to my report.
Ace, can I interject a question? Is that
Absolutely.
an option for parents to raise that concern with you, to say, my child's really been struggling, can he or she come in more often?
So I have had parents make that request. For the most part, it's if a student is already identified with a learning disability and we're talking about compensatory services or additional.
But if they're not a special needs student, could they have that conversation? Oops, did he just freeze? Everybody.
All right. Well, Mr. Thompson's frozen. Mr. Campbell, why don't you pick us up real quick, buddy?
Well, technology has
Yeah, I
finally
would've
found a
thought
way
you
to
would-
silence Mr. Thompson.
With a pillow like that behind you, I would have thought you would.
You know, that pillow is there just for you, Jim.
I know you did. Okay. All right.
I thank you all this evening. Thank you for everybody who's watching. I want to pick up on something Ace was just talking about in terms of retention, because we have the same approach at the elementary level. All the research on retention is awful. The consequences are almost invariably negative. I've retained 2 kids in my years in Berlin, both times because the parents were adamant, and I regretted it both times. And it didn't work out both times. You know, we think if they just do it again, they'll do it better. The reality is that kids who struggle need support with learning, not repetition of learning. So for those parents who are listening tonight or who talk about this tomorrow, retention is not something we would consider. It's certainly a conversation we can have, but it's not something that we intend to do. It's a different situation at the high school for a lot of different levels. And I know that Diane struggles with it on her end, but for us, it is not something that's helpful. You've got my report with all that said, and I won't go through the whole thing with you. I will just real briefly talk about it. We're all kind of experiencing the same learning lags. Part of it is related to the late start. Part of it is some of that remote learning that we all had to go through. We're noticing it more in math than we are in ELA at Berlin. Interesting, we're noticing that teachers almost universally reported being at or ahead of the game with science and social studies because those are easier topics to do online. So they're feeling really good about that. I think what we're going to find down the road is that while we're seeing good results, we're kind of close to where we typically are. I think that down the line, we're going to find that the depth of learning is not necessarily there. So for example, because I'm a week or so ahead of my good friends in Boylston on Ames web testing, I've got pretty good results and they're very positive. You know, the rate of growth is essentially the same from this year to last year. Percentile scores are roughly the same this year as last year, pre-pandemic. And those all look really good. But I think as we poke at this and as we get kids back and settled and start to challenge them more, we're going to see that they don't deeply understand some of those important concepts. Some of it is stuff that's easily corrected. Like I'm noticing my kindergarten kids this year don't write nearly as nicely as my kindergarten kids last year did because they haven't had the same amount of practice. Some of that stuff is easy to fix. Some of the other things will take a little more time. And I think we'll see an echo of this pandemic learning loss for a little while. Just real quick, because I just point out real quick, like at Tohoto, our attendance has been essentially the same, a tick higher overall than it usually is. We have not seen a lot of student movement from hybrid to the remote program. We don't have that many kids in it right now. I think it's 12. We've had a couple come back. We had a couple go out. But the student body has been pretty consistent. Ace was starting to talk about 4-day learners. We too went through our kids who are receiving special education services. I think they've all been considered 4 days. Most have come 4 days. And we are starting to, in situations where we see, and this again goes back to something Dr. Henry asked, where we're seeing kids starting to really struggle now at home. We've brought a couple of those kids back 4 days. That's my report. If you have any questions. Okay.
Oh, no, thank you, John. I appreciate the comments about the depth of learning and the more complex topics like mathematical problem solving, for example, that are harder to test in a short dipstick kind of a computerized test. or writing development and that kind of thing. So
Reading comprehension.
right, right. I agree with you that we're likely to see more next year, more issues. Yeah, thank you.
I have just a general question for all three principals, actually. Most of your reports were fairly positive as far as the academics go. Just in general, it doesn't seem like there's a significant academic loss because of the remote. Is that somewhat accurate? Is that a fair statement?
No.
It's
No,
not.
like we're just talking about, that's what I meant by depth of learning. Where
So-
the surface stuff they're getting, the deeper stuff we're going to need to go back to. That's
the
part
remote
of the planning we'll have to do long term, is to really dig into what is it that kids missed, so that when we come back, both this year and all of next year, we'll be able to really focus on those areas of weakness.
So there is a significant loss with the remote learning, and it's not very helpful then.
I think that not having children in front of you every day, that's how we learn in elementary school.
Yeah, of course. But we'll keep going with it the next 3 months. Is that what we're gonna? That's what's going on. It's not really great. It's not
Mr.
working.
Donovan, you're not gonna lure me into that conversation.
Oh, I'm just saying it for general thought. I mean, it's not working really well. I thought after reading your reports that, I mean, it wasn't really going to be that significant of a problem. But now after hearing you speak, it sounds like it is a significant problem, and we're just going to keep going with it.
Variety of things to consider.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of this learning lag or gaps are not really going to show themselves till next year. When you get,
Well, it seems like they've been showing themselves already.
I think people are getting inklings, but you don't really know till you're face to face with kids again, and you can have more in-depth instruction and interactions with them. The testing that they're doing right now, except for things like probably the district determined measures that Diane mentioned, probably give more nuanced information about depth of understanding, I would imagine. But some of the kinds of testing that the dipstick kind of testing they're doing doesn't really test the depth of learning. So they don't really have the data other than teachers' own observations from student work, analysis of the student work and stuff. So,
And those observations are showing that it's not really working well.
I can't say that. What I'm saying is that some of what I think John is referring to is just going to surface when kids really get back into routine face-to-face learning.
So for parents of a current senior, their kids, it's not working very well for them. They're not going to be here next year. So what do we do for that? We have summer programs, I guess. They can come back for summer programs, I think someone said. But effectively, haven't done very well this year. Let's hope to make it up next year. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think I can.
I'm not hearing anything about hope. First of all, I'm hearing about hard work.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, everybody's been working hard this year. I get that, but what are we doing for these kids? Is this repairable, or is this harm going to last forever? John, I like John's quote: "The echo of the pandemic academic loss will be seen for a while." Yeah, probably for the rest of their lives. So, I mean, fortunately, we're in a good community where a lot of other things don't really affect these kids lifelong, but I worry for those communities that aren't in as good a position as ours.
I have a question for the principals, because I look at it somewhat the same, but somewhat with a different perspective. I don't want you to answer this from a very literal stance, but we made a decision early on to put parameters in place as it relates to health and safety for this year. How would you, based on your feedback, what would your comment be as it relates to, John, I understand there's some gaps, and I appreciate that you guys have plans in places to close those gaps as we get the kids back in school and move into next year. But how would you categorize how educationally the kids are doing under the idea and the parameters that we made decisions, not only just with the idea of we want to impact kids, and the idea is the unfortunate impact that the children are having, but also to keep into consideration that we were also considering the safety and health of teachers, students, and folks working in the building.
So I'll take that but just to make sure I'm understanding, like, you know, there is a instructional time on learning loss because we're having mask breaks, because we're making sure hands are washed, because it's taking longer to transition. And so, yes, there is an impact on that. You know, going back to Mr. Topman's question and John's response, you know, what I think you see in our reports is that, you know, kids are still learning the standards that we would typically teach them. They're, you know, it's hard to know how deep and how engaged they are, because a lot of those fun kind of extra things that really cemented learning are not things that we've been able to do. You know, it's streamlined teaching. And it's streamlined not just because, you know, we have kids in hybrid, but to Mr. Spencer's point, because even when they are there, we're keeping them 6 feet apart and they have masks on, and overall, the situation is hard. It's hard for kids. It's hard for staff. It's not how we would like to be teaching. I know it's not how the teachers would like to be teaching. So there's an impact from all of that. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, and it does. And it's, my question is more, you know, around the full context of the conversation. It's very easy to just say the kids have had a loss. Everybody's had some type of dramatic, socially emotional, you know, impact to them. But to just be very scoped as that's the only impact and decisions that were made directly impacted that. I mean, we have to have the full keep in mind the full context of where we were from an educational standpoint. So that's all.
So the plans that Jeff proposed with the hybrid part on the elementary side, 3 days in with 2 days out, and then full streaming, would getting to that earlier help at all? Like, I'm not saying go back full 100%, but we know some parents will choose not to go full even when the time comes. So if the numbers support it, would you consider doing that 3 day in, 2 day remote with the full streaming? Would you consider starting that earlier? If the numbers supported all the other safety and health measures that are currently in place. You muted yourself, Jeff.
We'll certainly look into it. I mean, it's a suggestion. Again, you know, that's just a draft, what we presented tonight. And so.
I mean, look into it, but we're running out of time. I mean, you say there is a loss here. We are behind. You know, coming back at the end of April leaves about 5 or 6 weeks to catch up. Is that enough?
Well, you know, we're just starting to put this plan together. So we're just putting a draft together. As I mentioned, you know, we continue to, you know, try to follow the science here. And we don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks.
Yeah, the science. I mean, that's what's so frustrating, I think, for a lot of parents and for me personally, is that we're in February going into March and the plan's only just coming together. I mean, that's frustrating that there wasn't a plan already in place. It's frustrating that, you know, we sign a contract that doesn't leave you any room for following the science later on if it changes. I mean, it's frustrating. And I think a lot of parents share that frustration. And pretty much I'm at the end of my rope too with everything that's been.
Well, we are following the science. I mean, what's more scientific than a vaccine? I mean, that's something that wasn't there before. And that's, you know, so it wasn't an option for us before. It wasn't an option for the committee before when they were making their decision.
Yeah, I get it. I understand.
That's what we're doing now. And I don't know how many districts that are ahead of us. I mean, except for there's probably 5% who went in full early on out of 225. And most of those weren't fully in. They had elementary schools, might have been in the middle and high schools with remote or hybrid. So, but in terms of actually coming back, most of the districts that I know of, that I've looked at, are planning like an April return.
Well, yeah.
late March, April. I don't know anybody
Well,
else. I mean, if there is,
I mean,
let
the
me know.
question is, does that leave you enough time to catch up? Everything needs to be caught up. Does that leave enough for,
There,
we're gonna have work over the summer? Work, I know last year when you said the spring was lost, you were supposed to make strides in catching those kids up this year. It sounds like that's, you know, maybe happening, maybe not, but we won't know, I guess, until next year when we look at it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, we were anticipating coming back in something other than this model. I mean, we didn't know it was gonna happen, so we anticipated, just like we're anticipating now, that the fall will be more normal than it is now, but I can't guarantee that. We did put tutors in place to help out, which is what we had planned to do. But in our original plan, we planned to put them in the school because we thought we'd be full in, and you know, I don't think anybody knew that this virus was gonna be this long lasting. So
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it would be longer lasting. Nobody thought that we'd have a vaccine in less than a year. I don't think. I think that's a miracle.
I just want to say too that the notion of hurry up and catch up doesn't really work, I don't think, for
No, I believe you. Yeah.
classrooms or for teaching and learning. You don't just open a kid's head and pour it in and there we're caught up. The teachers are going to be working in very sophisticated ways to read students' needs and to adjust what they do every day according to to make sure kids are really ready to learn and that the learning is suited to their particular developmental needs when they return. And that's not just a straightforward hurry up and catch up before the end of the year. It's very, this is why we pay professionals to do this work. It's very challenging. And they're going to do, I trust, a lot of different things to try to rebuild the context for learning. So I don't think the urgency of hurry up and catch up is the right frame to bring to this. I don't think it's useful myself.
I mean, I think there is a sense of urgency, but that what you said, Susan, works great for current K through 11th grade, right? What happens with seniors? Are you doing any work with universities and college? You know, what's going to happen when they get there? Are they going to be prepared?
Well, I think one thing.
Susan,
one thing to remember is that we're not in a little bubble. This is a whole spread of students across the country. And
yeah, so we've lowered the goalpost for the entire country. So that's except for not the entire country, because it's really a state by state thing. So Massachusetts right now is in this situation, another state's in another situation. Kids from both states might end up at a same university.
So, Mr. Taubman, I can respond to that because we just actually had a virtual college panel event with universities, and they made it very clear that number one, the admissions process looks extremely different than it has ever looked. You know, you talk about data. Right now, they are looking at, you know, the SATs. A lot of colleges and universities are no longer looking at that for admissions purposes. They are also looking at changing the way that the students, when they come into the colleges and universities, are taking assessments. And then from those assessments will then determine courses that they are currently placed in. And so they are working with high schools, you know, across the nation to change the way that the colleges and universities, the look of what freshman year will look like, because they are in the exact same boat that we are in. The fact that colleges and universities, unless you're in the southern part or the Midwestern part of you know, this country, are also remote. Or they have their students only in for their lab classes, and the rest of the classes are remote. And so they are having, you know, learning losses as well at the university level.
I don't know. I mean, universities are probably in a much better position to handle remote learning. I mean, they've been doing it for 20 something years. I mean, when I did my master's degree, it was completely online. And that was 15 years ago. I'm sure they've made strides since then. So I think they're in a better position than we are. Let's continue on.
Okay, that's a good pause. I'm going to, from an agenda standpoint, going to move us along through it. We're already at 9 o'clock. So I want to make sure we are able to get through the remainder of the agenda. I am going to, at this point, make an agenda change as well. I see our numbers dwindling from our public participants. So I am going to make a little movement in the agenda at this time because I suspect that many of our folks hanging on are still looking to get some information and update on our discussion around the travel policy. So I'm going to ask that we move up the policy subcommittee discussion at this time. So I'm going to move item number 7 up. And then it'll move everybody else down. So, Susan, we're going to have the policy subcommittee discussion at this point.
So I'm just trying to clarify, Jim, are you talking about the policies that are up for a vote?
Yeah, we're going to handle it in the same way we would handle your section there in that order. We're just going to move to the policy subcommittee section. So you can start with your item A and we'll move through your portion of the agenda.
Okay, so we have 3 policies up for a expedited vote tonight that were worked on in conjunction or in response to a Department of Ed Tier 1 monitoring review visit. Karen explained to the policy subcommittee that the state is trying to separate out homeless students, students in foster care, and students in military families, and not lump them all together under homeless students. So several policies have revised language in them to address the state's new requirements. So those are policies JB, JFAA. JB is equal educational opportunities, JFAA is admission of resident students, and JFABD is homeless students enrollment rights and services. Those are in the drive, so I guess I should just ask if there were any questions about those 3 policies. Okay, so we're asking, because that's in response to the DESE monitoring expectations, so we're asking for a vote on those tonight. Then there are 2 policies that are up for first read tonight. The first is policy EBC supplement, which was the general interim policy on COVID related issues. That includes the travel policy that is up for discussion. I guess, Jim, I'm assuming you'll facilitate that part because wasn't part of my review here. But the EBC revision that we made was to change originally the policy was written to the policies that were changed within this COVID period under the superintendent's leadership would revert back to their original language when the governor declared the end of the COVID emergency. And we felt that that should really be changed to those things should end when the local school committee determines that. It should be a local decision, not a state decision, as to when those policies revert back. So we made a language change to indicate that with advice from legal, that they would end when a school committee or the governor determined that, so that there's leeway for the governor's orders. We can follow the governor's orders when he declares the end of the emergency, or we can make an independent decision on that. So that language was updated. And are there any questions on policy EBC? That was really just to get local decision making on that. And then the last one is policy CBI, evaluation of the superintendent. And this was just the addition of a paragraph, which we have mentioned before, sort of how to handle when we have school committee members enter the year or enter their roles on school committee or leave their roles on school committee mid-term before they've completed their term, and what should be their role in the evaluation of the superintendent. So we inserted language that said that whether they were coming or going, they would be asked to complete the summative evaluation comments and ratings in full to the best of their ability. And that in the final summative report, we would simply note what period they were in office or in their role on the school committee, so that those reading the summative report will understand the period of time that they had a chance to observe the superintendent's performance. And then the sitting school committee would be able to discuss that input and still vote on the final rating for the superintendent. So the rating provided by a school committee member who left earlier before their term was complete, the final summative rating is not an average of ratings. It's a sort of a preponderance of the evidence, a preponderance of ratings that will be considered. So it doesn't affect any kind of averaging end result, that kind of thing. I'm not being very clear about that, but those of you who've done the superintendent evaluation process before probably know what I mean. So questions about policy CBI and the suggestion to have all school committee members participate in the evaluation?
No, I guess, Susan, it's important to note, right, that you did solicit feedback from Superintendent Zangi, as well as legal, as well as our resource at MASC.
Yes.
It is agreed on that not all the feedback was the same, but that the decision was made, or the changes were made with feedback from those particular groups.
Correct. Thank you.
No questions there.
Okay, so those are coming. Those last two are first read. They'll be up for a vote in March.
Yeah, we'll handle those votes during our business items.
Good.
I'll handle. We will most likely do the vote on this next item during this now. I'm going to move the vote up for that. We'll handle the vote for that particular item next. Susan, do you want me to lead this conversation?
Yeah, because you put those pieces in the folder, so that would be good.
So I just want to put. I want to try to, as best as I can, put the context around this discussion, as well as what I'm asking the school committee this evening. A little background and sort of how we got here. It started with a discussion, parent inquiries, discussion around, like mentioned earlier in the evening, class of 21 and their ability to travel, and different questions and communications, parents internally around our travel policy. And as we move forward and we get closer to a full return to school, I broached the subject with Jeff, and Jeff and I agreed that this might be a good time to review a change in this policy and discuss it as a school committee. The first thing I asked Jeff to do was to get feedback from our current policy. Was done and provided, I believe, through the policy subcommittee. Now, mind you, secondly, I spoke with our chair of our policy subcommittee, Susan, about this discussion, because it is a policy subcommittee, policy, and our normal process would be to run this through policy subcommittee. But I felt, due to timing and sense of urgency, I wanted to address this in a different way I discussed this with Susan. We went back and forth a little bit, and after our agreement, we discussed that it would make sense to handle it in this fashion. So I asked Jeff to discuss this internally with the nurses who put together our current policy, travel policy, which reads. As I stated today, all staff, and again, this, some wording stuff that all staff and students are expected to comply with the Governor Baker's travel orders. In addition, if staff and students of any age travel outside the states deemed low risk, staff and students will be required to quarantine for 14 days regardless of test results. That's our current policy. I asked Jeff to review this with the nurses, and the nurses came back with their agreed to. I don't want to use the term compromise to make it was like that, but agreed to work with us and provide some feedback on how they would feel comfortable changing the policy. And I added some of that feedback in the document that we have titled EBC Supplement General Updated, right? So a general change to that. And I kept the wording the way it was because it was already approved with wording the first time around. So all staff and students are expected to comply with Governor Baker's travel orders. In addition, if staff and students or any age travel outside the states deemed low risk, staff students will be required to. And in this case, the change would be quarantine for 7 days upon arrival to Massachusetts with proof of student staff negative PCR test taken on or after day 5. Day 0's date of arrival in Mass will return to school on day 8 after return to Massachusetts, if no test, quarantine for 10 days. And if anybody's familiar with the current state's, I believe, close contact policy, this is a direct reflection and sort of mirrors what the state's direct contact policy is, okay? The other option that we have is to change our policy to fall in line with all of the state guidelines. Which is, without summarizing, to summarize it, basically is a test within the 72-hour period prior to returning to Massachusetts, right? And so on, the other pieces of that. And you've all probably read that, so we don't have to go through that. So that's the context of the discussion. What I will be asking the committee this evening is we will be bringing the options that we have in front of us are to make no change to our current travel policy, change it to the option that is presented to us that is what I will say the recommended option from the nurses within the district, and or change our policy to reflect the state guidelines. Another piece I will add, so once this topic was broached, I did discuss this with Russ from a legal perspective, and the feedback from legal and suggestion for legal is that as a committee, we should be following state guidelines, where he would not suggest that we make changes to the policy that would not fall within state guidelines. And that is the recommendation he's providing to all the districts that he covers. At a high level, his reasoning behind that was that it is just too sensitive a subject to be making changes in that sense, and it is a topic that should be left up to state guidelines and decisions from that perspective. So what I'm going to ask, I felt that it would be in the best interest of the committee if we discuss this as a committee, as I do not want to be responsible or do not feel I should have the responsibility or want the responsibility to make this decision in general for us, nor is that our standard practice or policy. We discuss these things, but I wanted to bring it to the committee to have a general discussion around this. I'm going to then take a general consensus idea from our committee, what they would like to see us do from a travel standpoint. And then I will, based on that feedback, I will ask for a motion on a vote or potential no vote if we don't change anything to change our travel policy. I hope I explained that well. I hope I put enough context around that. If I didn't and you have questions, please let me know. But I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak. So without calling anybody, does anybody want to provide feedback first? Maybe I will call on everybody. I was thinking, you know what? I'm going to call on everybody. Why don't we start with Angela?
Cold calling.
So yeah, I guess my thoughts were, I mean, I feel like the original travel piece was put together by our nurses. So the nurses, I'm guessing, like our original policy, and they are saying, well, here's what we're comfortable with: this quarantine for 7 days, a test on or after day 5, and return to school on day 8. Return to school on day 8. And I was fine with that. You threw me a little bit with Russ's comment about following the state guidelines, because I feel like the state guidelines make me nervous because of knowing that people don't really develop symptoms until between 5 and 11 days, unless that's changed from being exposed. So that's why I like this nursing draft, actually. So I'm a little on the fence. I do think it's time. I do think we should not stick with our original policy. I think it should be either changed to the nurse's recommendation or the state guidance. I'm just not quite sure yet which way I want to go.
Okay, Keith?
I pretty much have the exact same thought as Angela. So explain to me, Jim, just because I don't remember reading the exact state guidelines. Was the exact state guidelines as opposed to what was suggested by the nurses?
So are you asking me to read you the state guidelines?
No, you just get it. I mean, just a brief, because I did read it. Just briefly what the
Quarantine for 10 days or produce a negative COVID-19 test result that has been administered up to 72 hours prior to your arrival in Massachusetts. If not obtained before entry to Massachusetts, a test may be obtained after arrival. However, all such arriving travelers must immediately begin the 10-day quarantine until a negative test result has been received.
Right. Okay. I didn't remember if it was 72. Okay. No, I agree with Angela. I do. I'm on the fence at the moment too. I am. I'm sorry.
After polling of 3 other districts that in combination of myself and other committee members have reached out to, all districts that we received feedback from all said they follow state guidelines.
Okay.
Mike? Still on mute, Mike.
Sorry, I didn't hear you call me, Jim.
Oh, sorry, there you go. Yep.
Yeah, thanks. So my question would be, what was the science and data behind the existing policy right now that the nurses liked? And has that changed?
I can't answer that question. I wasn't part of those discussions. I guess I would have to lean on Susan's the only remaining member who's part of that policy discussion, and/or Jeff.
Jeff brought it from the nurses, so you had some conversation with the nurses. Do you recall that, Jeff?
Yeah, what was the question?
What was the science and data behind the existing policy as it is right now, and has that changed?
The science behind it was that symptoms could show up after 10 days. And so 14 days was the safest, to have a 14-day quarantine.
And has that changed to make us make a change?
Well, it hasn't changed. 10 days were put in for compliance, and it says it in the state data.
All right. The other thing from being in the subcommittee, the policy subcommittee, when we were talking about the last bit about the governor making the change to suspend the policies after his emergency is lifted, Russ from legal advised us that we shouldn't upset the governor by going against what he says, because he's, sensitive like that. So I would suggest if his policy is the state policy, then we probably should go with the state policy. That's my feeling.
Thank you. Lori?
Thanks, Jim. For me, I think the biggest thing is what Russ said, and especially with trying to check with surrounding communities and seeing that they follow the protocol of the state. I understand originally our idea was that we're so different, like take for instance, us compared to Worcester. We have different communities, and so we wanted to have a different policy. But I feel that where we are right now and what they're using to determine that, I don't know, I feel like that's what we should be following if that's what the state says they want for every community. And, you know, that coupled with really what we've heard from some parents regarding the seniors, you know, these kids, you know, when they say they applied blind, that means they haven't gone and seen these colleges. So, you know, when I think of when I went to school, I went and walked around campuses, I got to eat in the cafeteria, I got to see the dorms. These kids have literally, you know, either seen it online or watched a video, submitted their applications, and now during February vacation, when they would be able to go and see them in person, when they come back, they have to decide. I mean, when they come back, they don't even have to decide. Per our current situation, they would be home for many more days and they would not be able to take part in extracurricular activities. So I think for those three reasons, I'm very much for changing it to keep it in alignment with the state. It just seems to make sense on a lot of different levels. And I completely understand the nurse's concern. It's justified, but I also feel at the same time, when you take everything else into consideration, the logical answer would be following Governor Baker's guidelines.
Thank you. Susan?
Yeah, I'm really quite conflicted on this, actually. I think the nurse's proposal is also reflective of CDC guidance. And I see merit for that, particularly when many of the college campuses are having difficulty controlling the virus spread on their campuses. So they're visiting those sites and then coming back to our site. So that's a little unnerving. I understand the inclination to just say, let's just go with the governor's orders. What we had in place was more higher level of precaution. And I guess I would tend to support the nurse's position right now, given that the CDC and the state still caution against any travel, and that some of the school sites that we would want to support people visiting their schools, it's a big decision. I totally understand that. Visiting those sites may actually introduce a greater lack of safety back here. So I think I would support the nurse's proposition at this point.
Okay. We're making this difficult on ourselves. My input would be what I find interesting in the whole scenario is that we want to believe that traveling outside of this state to somewhere which is in a much safer spot, lower contraction rate, especially, you know, the Maines, New Hampshires of the world, and areas of that where some of these folks, where parents might have homes or people would travel to do recreational activities, where their ability to contract is much less than some of the areas that they're allowed to travel to within our own state, to me just seems to be an extreme contradiction of belief. I also believe that parents are doing this anyways. I believe that regardless of our policy, I think our parents learned after the first time around, as long as they instruct their child to not let the teachers know and they're not putting it on Facebook where they went over the weekend. I think they're doing it anyways.
I don't think that's a good reason though, Jim.
I'm providing you my own personal feedback. This isn't a
Yeah,
reason.
but,
I'm speaking as an individual committee member at the moment, not as I'm providing my input to the situation. So for me, I actually think it could benefit us following the state guidelines, as we may encourage parents to utilize more testing and provide more input on travel, so we could track some of that. Jeff has mentioned in multiple times very low, in some of our questions around these things, very low numbers or potential close contacts or updates of children who are positive or whatnot, right? So our numbers here in our community, which is excellent, are extremely low. So that's just as an individual how I look at it. But like anything, I got the feedback in which I provided you guys from a legal perspective. I tend to fall in line, or I tend to believe that the recommendation from our legal department on such a sensitive subject is to, I'm trying to think of some of the words that he used. We'll always be chasing the state guidelines and having discussions like this where rather than that, we should be allowing the state to set these guidelines and set these standards for us. And if we have issues with them, lobbying our state to change some of those things. And then the last thing I'll say is, as we're inching closer to a full return to school, I just think it falls in line with where we're going from a school district. So that would be my feedback.
Jim, just to piggyback a little bit on what you said and what Susan said, I think the point that Jim was trying to make is that we'd be fooling ourselves if we think we've just been in this bubble where no one's been leaving the state. So if people have been leaving the state, the point is that we haven't had a lot of cases. So I think that's my guess, Jim, when you said, and I don't want to speak for you, when you said that it's, there are people leaving.
Laura, that's an interesting point, actually. If we were to adopt the state guidelines, it seems like that gives a little bit more flexibility for parents, right? You can test back in, essentially, if you get a negative test. There is this idea among parents that, they have to sneak around and not say when they go to out of state or wherever because of fear of whatever's going to come down on them or their kids from it. So if we can put something in place that gives them that flexibility, makes them more comfortable, and like Jim is saying, being honest and telling us that they're going somewhere so they get the test, they get the data, it actually would help keep that out, because they're going to go anyway. But if they know they can come back and get a negative test, they're going to go and take the test. If the test comes back positive, they're going to stay out of school. That's going to help keep our transmission lower. So those are all good points, I think, Jim and Lori.
I think that's a good point too, Mike. And I definitely say that now. I'm definitely trending towards following the governor's recommendations, primarily because, anecdotally from the contact tracers I know, it's these family gatherings where this spread is really happening, and we're past that. The colleges, they do so much contact tracing with the when they have a positive case that I'm not concerned at all about students visiting colleges in person and coming back with the virus. But I do think you make a good point. Anyway, I just say that now I do know my decision, but
So, and I want to be, because I kind of want to keep us moving. Trying to do this judicially, I do get the sense that there is more of a lean towards our vote on following the state guidelines. But I do want to give anybody a last minute comment if Keith or Susan had anything that they wanted to add.
No, I'm also, I mean, based on what the discussion right now, and we should be going that route if we're working towards going back all in person, fully in. So I would go with the state guidelines. That's the way I'm feeling.
Yeah, I would be more inclined to make this change before April vacation than before February vacation. And I still think I prefer the nurses' proposal, but I certainly can go with the will of the group. Whatever the leaning of the group is, I trust the group.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this vote now for us so we can kind of complete this action item on our agenda. So could I please have a motion to approve the change in, I want to say this appropriately, EBC supplement state guidelines to follow our new guideline set to follow the state guidelines for travel policy. That didn't sound great, but I think I got the point across.
Jim, I think you have that policy in the drive.
I have it worded as EBC supplement state guidelines.
Correct. So that's what we're voting.
Can I please have a motion to approve the updated travel policy as outlined in EBC supplement state guidelines?
Moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Lori?
I'm sorry, just a point of clarification?
Oh,
Are we
yep.
voting for what's in the drive or for the state guidelines?
We're voting for the change to supplement that changes the travel policy to follow state guidelines. So the document labeled, because the only change in the document is that last piece.
Right.
So the document EBC supplement state guidelines.
So we're voting.
We're voting for it. Yep.
If you look at that document, Lori, EBC supplement state guidelines, it has the language we're voting to approve.
Yeah, can I just read the language for the people in the audience, Jim?
Sure. Yep.
It says travel. All staff and students are expected to comply with Governor Baker's travel orders. Students and staff are expected to meet state testing requirements for travel. And then it provides the link to the travel order.
That's what we're voting to approve, Lori.
So I'm so sorry. I'm so confused. So are we voting to approve what's in the drive, or are we voting to change it to the governor's orders?
There are multiple versions in the drive.
Okay, that's why I'm looking at the one that has that the nurses approved.
Yeah, so I just read what we're voting.
We are approving the version that moves us.
Window. If you don't see this one titled EBC Supplement State Guidelines, you might have to refresh your window.
Can I vote in a minute? Can you skip me?
Yep.
Want to look it up?
Well, let's give it a second. I don't want to move forward with the vote unless if there is a question or concern that Lori has, I want it to be addressed before anybody else votes. So I don't want to feel like anybody votes and then something's brought up. So
hold on, I'm just struggling to get this.
It's in the for votes folder, and it's in the specific EBC travel requirement folder. I had trouble relocating it earlier. Mm-hmm.
I had it open, but then I closed it.
Yeah, I know. It's like, where is that?
Did you say it's in the for votes folder?
Yes.
Okay, that's why I'm looking in I'm looking in the old one.
Yeah.
And it's the document titled EBC Supplement State Guidelines.
In the travel folder.
Gotcha. I'm almost there. I apologize.
We'll have to go in like 18 levels to find it.
Yeah.
I think I mean, I'm so sorry to sound stupid, but What I'm reading here, it says to follow Governor Baker's travel orders, but it doesn't reflect what Governor Baker's travel orders are, correct?
There's a
That's
link
correct.
to-
Because it's,
Okay, so we're voting for this right now.
There's a link. Yep. There's a link to the state guidelines.
that way, it's intended to be.
That way, if it
flexible.
changes, we will continue to follow the state guidelines that change.
So if Governor Baker changes the orders in another month, then that's what we follow.
Seriously, I'm really not this dumb, but what I'm reading here doesn't, I know it says that, and that was my initial problem, was that it says we're gonna follow Governor Baker's travel orders, but then it says in addition to that, it's gonna be more strict. I just wanna make sure I'm not voting for something that I don't want,
Stay,
or that I don't think is what,
stay
you know,
right
is
there.
this legally what?
You might not be, hold on. You might not be seeing this. I'm sharing the document as we
Thank
speak.
you.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes, okay, all right, thank you, Jim. That's not what I was seeing.
Okay. So
Gotcha.
for some reason, there might be a permissions issue somewhere, sharing issue, so that we can resolve.
Okay,
So
excellent.
what you're seeing here is what we are voting on.
Okay,
All
I
right?
vote aye.
Okay. Let's go. Roll call vote. Lori, aye?
Aye.
Okay. Keith?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Susan?
I'll accept it. Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
It's an aye from me as well. Okay, that will pass. We'll have that updated. I'll ask Christy to make an update and add this new version to the bbrc.org website for parents review. Okay. All right. Okay, that concludes policy subcommittee section. All right. I suspect we're going to have a number of folks drop off. So I'm going to go back to Bob on item number 4. And Bob, you're muted.
Good evening. I'll see if I can make up some time here.
Thank you, Chuck.
So I just have a couple agenda items. My reports on the school committee drive for your review. The first item is just a brief update on the budget, which we'll be presenting at open hearing in 2 weeks. I had initial discussions and meetings with the towns. They expressed, and we haven't really received this type of guidance before. Received guidance to, but most towns do have it. We received guidance that they're seeking targeted increase levels of 2.5% to 3%. They've expressed that this is a very challenging time, and they would not be able to support a larger increase. I think that what they've provided us for guidance is similar to what I've heard in other districts. So Jeff and I are working to, our preliminary budget's a little bit higher than that. We came in at around 5%. To get to 2.5% to 3%, we'd have to cut, to get to 2.5%, we'd have to cut 465,000. We are pretty comfortable. We've identified about 2/3 of that. And we have some work left to do. I don't want to go into a lot of details yet because not everything's been firmed up, but we'll be presenting that in 2 weeks and hope to make more progress when we present the budget. In another aspect of that too is that people in the towns are also struggling, this is kind of that the towns are trying to kind of limit the impact to individual taxpayers in their communities. So it's a theme that's common across a lot of school districts.
Hey, Bob, just one quick thing. Can we, and I know you've been working closely with the two communities, I think with both FinComs as it relates to the budget. Can you just make sure that they all have the invites next week? I know it's a public meeting and there's invites, but I would like to make sure that they are specifically invited from us to attend our next budget hearing.
Sure. Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
So the next item is, so if there's no questions on that, I'll move on to the next item, which is our excess and deficiency certification. It has now been certified by the Division of Local Services in the Mass Department of Revenue. We were certified at 424,528. It's about a little bit more than an 80,000, just a little bit under an $80,000 increase from last year, due to a combination of kind of favorable revenues and savings in the operating budget. There's details on the Google Drive for your review. And I just wanted to say that, we do need that certification from them in order to be able to use E&D in our budget. And, one of the things Jeff and I are talking about is whether we need to potentially use a little bit more than the 60,000 that we used last year, given the I guess the financial challenges and with the goal of meeting the town's targets of 2.5% to 3%. So it's good news that it's been certified, and that's my report.
Bob, is there any, I have a question for you just real quick. I know the town's asked you to hit 2.5% to 3%. Is there any ability to do even better than that? I don't know any families that have had a 5% increase in their personal budget or even a 3%. A lot of the communication we got from parents over the last month or so, some of it had to do with all the extra financial burdens they have with the remote learning. So is there any way we can do better than that for them? That's all. You don't have to go ahead and answer, but that's something I want.
Yeah, I mean, to do so would come at, there'd be difficult decisions on like, how do we get there? And how do we get there conversations? We're doing a level service budget. We're not adding any positions. Strike that. I think we're converting one position from half-time to full-time, really to meet special ed needs, but to do less. A lot of our costs are contractual, labor, special ed costs we're mandated to meet. We've had some significant increases there. So I don't see how we can achieve that without reducing the services we'd be providing to students.
Any other questions for Bob? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Bob. Karen, you're up next.
Thanks. I'll try and keep it short. In addition to everything that has been going on this year, we've also had to do a couple of compliance reviews that are regularly scheduled with these. And I just really want to thank the principals, because in addition to everything extra that they have going on this year, they've been revising trainings and collecting information for me, and it's very much appreciated. The first review that we had was the tiered focus monitoring review, which used to be called the CPR. It's a 6-year process with an on-site review every 3 years. Excuse me. So this year they focused on special education and civil rights policies and procedures. We spent a lot of time updating those procedures and policies last year and submitted them this year. We're classified as a tier 1 district, which means that the state doesn't have any significant issues with compliance or performance. So they allow us to do a self-eval where we collect the information and we submit it to the state, and then they come in. On February 4th, Jeff and I and some parents met with the on-site reviewers. It was done virtually this year because they couldn't be on-site, and had interviews. They asked questions, they clarified our procedures, and at the end of it, they told us that they had some very good parent response. They got about 60% parent response to their questions, which was pretty high for any district to get. So we appreciate all the parents that took the time to do that. And they were very pleased with what they saw. We have to wait for the final report to see if we have any areas of non-compliance that we'll need to address. But they were very positive when we left, so we're feeling good about it. The other one that we had was the educational stability review, which is around our policies for the homeless, foster care, and military families. So those were some of the policies that you voted on, or you will vote on tonight, that the policy subcommittee worked on and brought forward. So that's it in a nutshell. Any questions? Thanks.
Not hearing any questions. Thank you, Karen. Paul, how are you, sir?
Awesome. Couldn't be better, right? So I will also be brief. In the drive, Christy included a copy of a survey that I'll be sending out to districts regarding a technology fee and or an insurance program. A lot of districts have a program to cover their one-to-one devices, in our case, Chromebooks. And I put that in the report today just to get some initial feedback. If people want to email me over the next week, any particular data points that you might like to see that's not in that survey that will help you inform your decision. At some point, Bob and Jeff and I will be proposing some kind of program, whether it's us paying for it or whether it's some kind of fee or an insurance offering to the public. We'll be doing that at a future meeting, but in order to try to maybe cut off some of the questions or get some of the information that you might want in order to make your decision, I put that survey together. And then if there's things that, again, you want to add, don't feel like you have to throw it at me tonight, but just email me and I'll try to include that in the survey. And that's all I have.
Well, my only question would be what's driving this need or requirement or interest in this type of program now? Are you seeing issues with the one-to-one program? We have technical issues, break fix problems, obviously short staff, so you can't fix everything, right? So what's driving it?
Right. So it's a combination of all those. So, this year we're kind of eating any issues that we have. If we're fixing everything we can on our own, we're, robbing Peter to pay Paul in many situations. So we're taking sometimes parts from, one working to get two other non-working laptops up and going. We felt like this year was not the time to do that, to say, okay, everybody pony up $15, $20, whatever it's not a large amount of money, but it is still an amount of money. In working with Bob and Jeff, we felt that this year wasn't the year to probably bring that forward and say, hey, by the way, while you're doing this remote learning and you're struggling with all these things, can we have another $15? Can we have another $20? So it will be necessary in some form or fashion to sustain the numbers we have. And so again, at some point we'll make a proposal, and our recommendation may be that we're going to continue to do this ourselves, that it's not maybe worth the time and effort, or it's not, again, if anecdotally, I know districts are doing it. And again, that's why I want to try to formalize some of the data. But I can't tell you today, like what percent of districts are doing it across the state. And if they are doing it, is it self-funded? Is it, and again, I'm trying to, get some of that data for you to help you guys help us make that decision.
Yeah. And I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. My feedback would be, and I don't know if this is just a draft survey that you've got in here, but to me, it's a bit cumbersome of a survey. So I would, just my opinion would be to maybe streamline it a little bit, narrow down, some of the questions. And my other piece of feedback would be, we're asking parents, Jeff just talked about a survey this evening. We're asking parents to respond to a lot of surveys. I don't know if you and Jeff can get together and find out a way to.
So this would be going to other tech directors or other superintendents. This
Oh,
would be
okay, all right,
going
I
to.
totally, all right, woo, way
Yeah,
over.
no, this would not be, yeah. This is basically trying to find out the state of the state in terms of Massachusetts districts, what they're doing, if they have policies in place around that. So again, I could help point the policy subcommittee in the right direction as to if we had to adopt policies around this. And again, after getting the survey done, like Jeff and Bob and I may decide like this is something that we just want to build into the budget and forget about and not make it something that we offer. But we do have to come up with some kind of plan because we won't be able to sustain probably what we're doing. We made it work this year and we'll continue to make it work this year, but long term.
No, I get it. I apologize. I totally misread the whole thing. So I apologize. Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah, and I don't know if I prefaced it that way. Like I think I just copied it, and so yeah, my bad for not like saying this is what that would go to.
My bad. All good. Thank you. Any other questions for Paul? Cool. All right. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, we already did that. Last item on the agenda before we move to business items was going to be our school committee goals update. I'm going to remove the school committee goals update. I know we've been on here a long while, but I think there's another topic that we should cover just from a time sensitivity perspective. I know Susan brought it to my attention. I think some other folks brought it to my attention, and the idea of a discussion around how we can participate from an administration perspective, teacher perspective, school committee perspective, in resolutions that are going to Department of Education, state governors, X, Y, and Z. Unfortunately, timing didn't allow for us to pull together one to put in front of the school committee this evening, but I think we would probably leverage it from another district, join on, piggyback from another district, if that makes sense. We could do it on our own. But what I wanted to do is just quickly broach the topic and discuss and make sure that the committee was all on the same. I don't think we need a vote to approve to be part of something like this, but I do want to get committee consensus that everybody agrees that we should, this is something that we should do as a committee. And then what I'll do is, if it's okay with everybody, I'll volunteer, if we have a volunteer that wants to work with me on it, I'll take a volunteer. If someone, just help me write it up, and then we'll share it amongst the committee, make sure there's no initial, concerns with it. I don't think we need a vote to be part of that, but I do think I should just get consensus from the committee that it's a good idea and that we move forward with that. Questions, concerns? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Jim, you just clarify that a little bit more specifically?
Sure. There's a lot of, if you like on the MASC, there's resolutions, right? Framingham just released one on MASC to, they're sending a resolution to the governor to, and maybe I didn't even say this, right? To help push for the expediting of vaccines for teachers. Sorry, I didn't even say that. My bad.
It's the end of the night, Jim. Come on.
It's been a long night. So there's they're written in a number of different ways. Different school committees are piggybacking off of, I think like the Middlesex district did one. The superintendents, I think, to Jeff's point earlier, all put together a resolution that they sent to, off to the governor or whatnot, just, advocating for the expediency and the importance of getting the vaccines and the role they play in us getting the kids, back to school. So what I'm trying to do is just get, if everybody's cool, myself and another committee member, we can just write it up, work it up. It will be shared amongst before it's submitted. But I don't think we can wait till our next meet. I don't think it's something that should wait till our next meeting to review.
Jim, I'd be happy to work on that with you.
Okay.
Thank you, Lori and Jim.
But you do need a vote for the resolution. So if you put together something, we could vote it at the budget hearing. You could add it at the end.
Yeah, it should be quick, actually.
Yeah, because there's, as you say, you can look at the samples that are out there that the other school districts have done.
And I don't know why we haven't done it yet. I mean, I think we need to do this yesterday. Could we get something written up and do something before that next meeting? I mean, special meeting, whatever has to be done. I mean, these are the kind of things we need to do because we are running out of time. If we keep waiting, the vaccines, if that's what the union's dragging their feet on is the vaccines, then let's push for the vaccines, whatever we can do, work with them. And I don't know how they haven't used their power to get the vaccines yet. I don't understand it personally from looking at the governor's point of view, but let's do this and let's do it yesterday.
As long as we could post the meeting 48 hours, you could have a special meeting if you wanted to do something between now and the budget hearing. Well, you couldn't do it tomorrow because you had to post the meeting.
No, draft it up tomorrow, get a meeting for Monday night. I don't know. Whatever. For crying out loud, 48 hours is not a lot.
Yeah. So we do have a meeting in 2 weeks, but I'm getting the sense that I would support scheduling a special meeting, a quick special meeting to vote on and approve this. Mike, sounds like Mike would support this.
You think?
Have the support of other committee members.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. With that being said, I'm not going to commit to writing it up tomorrow. I will commit to working with Lori to get it written up as soon as we can. And then once it's written up, we'll make it a priority. We can post it and schedule I want to be sensitive to everybody's timing and availability as well. So what I'm going to do is write it up with Lori, and then I'm going to send an email to the entire committee and ask you to only respond individually. And I'm going to provide 1 or 2 nights, because it doesn't have to be a Tuesday night. I'm going to provide 1 or 2 options, and then or maybe even 3, and then I'll get the feedback and whatever consensus that works for everybody. That's when we'll schedule it for. Sound good?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Okay, moving forward, business items. Let's get through our voting. We already took care of number 1. Item number 2, could I please have a motion to approve policy JB, equal opportunity, and accept the recommended changes?
So
moved. I'll second that. Sorry.
I heard Susan, then Angela second. Could I roll call? Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Item number 3, could I please have a motion to approve policy JFBD, homeless students, accept recommended changes?
So moved.
I'll second.
Susan, Angela, questions? Hearing none. Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Item number 4, could I please have a motion to approve policy JFAA, admission of resident students, accepting recommended changes?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Susan? Angela second. Questions? Hearing none. Roll call. Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Me as well. Item number 6 is it's just for me, and I'm going to appoint Susan as well as Carol Young and Rich Mariani, who have graciously volunteered again to assist Susan in the great job they did last year in the process for the Moses Reed Tyler Scholarship Subcommittee.
Mr. Chairman, may
Yeah.
I interject?
Yeah.
Number 1 on the business items was for the travel policy, but not for the addendum on the actual travel. It was for the change, the other change
It was
that
for
the
okay,
policy
yeah, all
subcommittee
right.
had discussed.
Thank you. Okay, I'll get back to that. Thank you. That's why you're the best. Okay. Questions around Moses Reed Tyler Scholarship Subcommittee? Susan, thank you for doing it again publicly. Carol and Rich, Thank you for doing it again. You guys do an excellent job every year for an extremely important piece for the Berlin community. So,
And we have the application for approval, right? Is that what you're up to? I don't have the.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you need to appoint the committee, but we also need to approve the updated Moses Reed Tyler application.
And
is
that was in the drive, and I do.
not on, so it's not on the agenda. Was that in the drive?
No, it's number 5, Jim.
Number 5, yeah.
Oh my God, jeez, again.
It's past your bedtime.
Long day.
I do want to just point out that the due date for that application is notably earlier than it has been in the past. It's the end of March, and that's to accommodate make sure the process is completed before the May elections. So we do want to get the word out that any students applying need to pay a special attention to the due date information on page 1 of that application.
Okay, yeah, that was my question, Susan. I was like, why is the deadline so much sooner? You explained that. The other thing is, just a favor. I know Moses Reed commissioned the Berlin School Committee to handle this, but I think, and there's 2 parts there in that opening page. I don't have it in front of me. The first paragraph, I would say, leave it Berlin School Committee, because that's what Moses Reed
said.
But when you put in your address, the Berlin School Committee technically no longer exists. I would prefer if you said Moses Reed Subcommittee or Berlin Boylston Regional School District, care of Susan Henry, something like that, just in other parts of the docket to make that change.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for noticing that.
Okay. All right. So I was going too fast, so I'm going to slow down. I'm trying to get everybody, they want to catch whatever show's on at 10 o'clock. All right. So we've taken care of the appointment of Susan, Carol, and Rich. Item number 5, we're going to, could I have a motion to approve the Moses Reed Tyler Scholarship application, please?
So moved with the change that Angela just said, to change the mail address for applications to Berlin Boylston Regional School Committee.
Okay. Recognized. Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right. Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. I'm going to go back to item number 1. Could I please have a motion to approve policy EBC supplement related to the discussion as it related to the changes implemented for the flexibility around following the governor's changes? Susan, would you like to word this one for me?
I think all you have to say is to approve the wording in the, whatever we called it in the drive, EBC. What was it called? I'm sorry, I don't have it right.
Not the travel policy. It's EBC supplement.
Oh, not the travel policy? We voted on the travel policy?
We already voted on that. This is
the section where we can suspend
Expiration.
the policy at the end
Policy
of
expiration.
Policy expiration.
or
Yeah.
the vote of the school committee.
Yeah, so a motion to approve policy EBC supplement as it relates to expiration upon state and governor requirements.
Well, that's a little confusing, but
Yep, it's your policy.
I just don't have it in front of me, so I'm just hang on. Yeah, I see. Okay, hang on. No, the EBC change for that's not the travel policy, it was just a first read.
Is the supplement the one that I kept getting hung up on?
EBC and CBI are both first reads, except for the travel change. The travel change you said was the one we voted on, right?
Yep.
So we don't need to vote on,
So you're only asking for a first read on that tonight.
yeah, EBC supplement and CBI are both first reads.
Okay, then we'll add the vote on that to our agenda at the end of the month.
Yeah, or yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, then that wraps up, and then we have the remainder of first read, school calendar, and the other policy. Okay. Our next meeting is the 23rd. That's a budget hearing. Our agenda, outside of any votes that are required, our agenda will mainly focus and remain focused on Bob's presentation and our updated budget hearing that evening.
And are members of the town committees specifically invited to that?
Yeah, we talked about that. We talked about it, making sure that they're invited. Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Right.
All right. Could I please have a motion to close the Berlin-Boylston Regional Transition School Committee?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you
Closing
both.
the committee?
What's that?
Closing down the committee, or you're ending the meeting?
Ending the meeting.
Closing the
You
meeting.
think you're closing the committee?
That's us, the committee.
Could I please have a motion to close the Berlin-Boylston Regional Transition School meeting? Thank you. Appreciate that. See, that's what I get for reading that.
And if we voted on that, it'd be dangerous.
You've done a great job tonight, Jim.
Yeah.
Good job tonight.
Everybody.
All right. So I had a motion from Angela and a second from Susan. Roll call. Lori.
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
Angela.
Hi.
Susan.
Aye.
Mike. Mike, you there?
I said, yeah, I said, I sorry. Did you not hear me?
Okay. Didn't hear you. My apologies. It's an aye for me as well.